didn't exactly end well. After that, I blocked them and I had hoped that they wouldn't reach out to me again, but they contacted me yet again today. I guess they were using a burner phone because I couldn't recognize the number. Anyway, they called me up while I was working, and I was quite distracted, so I ended up answering because I thought it was an important call. But as soon as I heard my dad's voice on the other end, I was about to hang up. I didn't though, because he told me that he was standing outside my restaurant and he was desperate to see me, so I absolutely needed to meet him for coffee because he couldn't leave without talking to me. I tried to tell him that I was at work and I was going to be busy for the next couple of hours, but he told me that he was fine with waiting. He sounded very desperate and I was kind of worried, so I agreed to meet with him because otherwise, he might have entered my restaurant and thrown a temper tantrum. He didn't exactly say it, but it might have happened. And that was the last thing that I wanted, so I decided to cut my losses and just grab coffee with him. But after that phone call, I just couldn't go back to work because I was so distracted and pissed at my dad. So I decided to take a break and went out to meet him at the coffee shop that he had said he would be at close by. So I walked there and when I saw my father sitting inside, I immediately went up to him and I told him that what he was doing was absolutely unacceptable and he couldn't just harass me at work because he wanted money from me. But he told me that he was not here to talk about money, he was here to talk about my mother, and that took me by surprise. He told me that after that last conversation that I had with them, my mother had completely broken down and hadn't been herself. Even though 2 weeks had passed since we met, she hadn't been able to bounce back to normal and had become a shell of a person. So now, there was only one thing that could help and that would be for me to visit her and have a talk with her. My dad also looked pretty disturbed, so I was in a very tough position because I didn't want to hurt them on purpose, but at the same time, I didn't feel obliged to go see my mother since she hadn't bothered to speak to me in the past 3 years and things have been really bad between us. After thinking about it for a while, I told my father that I didn't have the time to go see her in person, and even if I did agree to go see her, I didn't know what exactly he expected me to say to her. Because it would be a lie for me to say that I forgive them since I didn't. And I couldn't forgive them because they had never apologized. My dad started getting very agitated when I said that I wasn't going to go see her and said that my mother was in a very bad condition emotionally because she had been really affected by what I had said the other day about none of their kids caring about them. To be fair, my mother had always been very delicate and fragile emotionally. It never took much to make her cry or hurt her even when we were younger, and everyone in the family knew that we kind of had to walk on eggshells when we were speaking to her. I do agree that my mother is a deeply sensitive person, but so am I, and if she can't let things go, neither can I. I tried to explain it to my father, but he told me that just for once, I needed to put our differences aside and go see my mom because she had completely broken down. After one point, we were just talking in circles, so I told him quite firmly that I was not going to be seeing anyone. At least not until both of them had apologized to me, and even then, I would need some time to think about it. For the past 3 years, they haven't even spoken to me. And even before that, they hadn't really treated me well. So naturally, it has become very difficult for me to perceive them in the same way that I used to or even care about them. I've built a life for myself without them, and they didn't seem to care about it until they needed me, or rather needed my money. Now, it was really unfair of them to expect me to put everything in the past and try to make things right with them just because my mother was upset. I was also been very upset when they cut me out of their lives, but they didn't seem to care about it, and neither did they check up on me after that, even though I had also been quite hurt. I told my father I was not going to see my mom and I was really busy, so if he tried to harass me at work after this, then I would be left with no option but to call the cops. And not just at work, I didn't want them visiting me either. I made it clear that I was serious about it. Then I left and went back to the restaurant because I had a lot of things to attend to. I thought that he was going to try and do something later on in the day, but thankfully, that did not happen. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I'm just really tired of this and regretting letting them back into my life that day in the first place. Update 3. Hi. So I'm back here again, but this time, thankfully, it's not because of my parents. Well, technically, it is. But at least not directly, so I haven't had to speak to them yet. Anyway, even though I haven't had a good relationship with my family for the past 3 years, I've got along well with my other relatives. All of them know that we had a falling out a couple of years back, and since then, we haven't been on speaking terms, and they also know the reasons why. But nobody really wanted to get caught up in the drama, so they stayed out of it by always inviting both me and my family separately to whatever events were being hosted, like weddings and birthdays and other parties. Recently, though, one of my cousins announced their pregnancy and I realized that my family had not been invited to the party. When I asked her about it, she told me that it hadn't been because of me, but just because she had a bit of an argument with my sister a couple of weeks before the party, around the time that she had posted the pregnancy news online. Apparently, Emma had accused her of trying to steal her thunder because her wedding was a couple of months ago, and she's so delusional that she thought that our cousin got pregnant on purpose just to outshine the bride. It was obviously a ridiculous thing to say, and our cousin decided to cut ties with her because nobody needs to start that kind of negativity when they're pregnant. I mean, can you honestly blame her for cutting Emma off? And by extension, she also decided not to invite my parents because they had taken it upon themselves to contact my cousin's parents and tell them that she was being a bit of a brat by making such a big deal out of her pregnancy, knowing that Emma was getting married in a couple of months. So for my family, I was the only person who had been invited because my cousin knew that I had nothing to do with them. And even though the rest of them not being invited had nothing to do with me and everything to do with their own behavior, they decided to put the blame on me. They just put out a statement online, saying that they had kept quiet about my jealous and insecure behavior when it came to Emma for the longest time because they did not want to ruin my reputation in the family or otherwise. But now, since I had taken it upon myself to the rest of the family against them, they were going to be forced to speak up. They made it sound like it was my fault that my cousin hadn't invited them to the pregnancy announcement party, and not only that, they made me look like the bad guy for continuing to be friends with Kevin, even though he had ruined my sister's mental health during their divorce. Of course, there was no mention of the fact that she had been cheating on him, because why would there be? They called me a self-centered and insecure loser and said that they were glad that they didn't have to call me their son anymore because they were going to disown me. I wish I could say I cared, but I really don't. A lot of people sent me that post since I couldn't see it because I'm blocked, and I told them not to bother arguing with my family because clearly, they are in over their own heads. Nobody who actually matters is going to buy any of what has been said in that post, so it's not like it's doing any actual damage to my reputation, so they can go on running their mouths. I'm way above this BS. At the same time, I am very grateful to the family members who are on my side because until now, even though they hadn't wanted to be caught up in the drama, I'm pretty sure that everyone is going to stay away from my parents and my sister. Update 4. Hello, everyone. It has been a couple of months since I last posted here because honestly, there was nothing much to talk about. After that statement that my parents put out online, blaming me for everything that was going wrong, most of our relatives pretty much stopped speaking to my family altogether. And I'm pretty sure that they would have blamed me for it as well, but there was no point in making any posts against me after that since the damage had already been done and it had gone to the point of no return. I was pretty happy without them, and I'm even happier now since I recently learned from a few of my relatives who are still in touch with my parents that apparently, Emma had cut them off. My parents hadn't been present at her wedding that happened a few weeks back, so that led to a lot of questions, and a few relatives who are still on speaking terms with them had decided to ask them what was going on, and they told them that they had to tell Emma that her wedding budget was way beyond their means and they couldn't afford it. So then, they had a huge fight because Emma was pissed since they had promised her that they would cover all the expenses, and now, they were going back on their word. They had tried to explain to her that they had made those promises because they had assumed that it was going to be within their budget, but her plans were too extravagant and they had to think about their own future as well since they were now both retired. Emma didn't like that, and being the spoiled brat that she is, she decided to cut them off and had her fiancé and his family pay for the wedding. So that meant that they had to scale down considerably and have a normal wedding but without her parents. Emma doesn't seem to be affected by any of this, but my parents are very upset from what I know, and they're very disappointed that neither of their kids seem to care about them. Which is fair enough because that's exactly what I had said in the beginning. Anyway, things are going well for me, so I don't really care about any of this. All of this just proves that you can't run away from karma, and it's going to catch up to you eventually. That's what happened with my parents soon enough. It's going to happen to Emma as well. So really, good luck to them. Cousin accused me of SA and my family kicked me out, cut off my college fund. Now she's dying of cancer and admitted the truth, but my family still wants me to keep quiet. When I was 18, my cousin, let's call her Jade, decided to falsely accuse me of SA, and unfortunately, my entire family bought the story. Jade is 4 years older than me, and we used to be close when we were kids, but eventually, we just grew apart. She is my uncle's daughter, who happens to be a single father. My mom's younger brother, my uncle, got married to his ex-wife when they were really young because he got her pregnant. But she ended up cheating on him, and that marriage ended within a couple of years. She tried to stay in touch with Jade for a few years, but eventually, she moved away with her new boyfriend, and since then, they have not had any contact. My uncle was a respectable man, and he was the kind of person who would struggle through everything on his own, but never accept help from anyone. He was a single father, and it was kind of admirable how he had dedicated his entire life to raising his daughter. So much so that he never even got serious with anyone else after his divorce with his ex. Until Jade was 18, her father took care of everything and even had a college fund set aside for her. But after that, when she said that she wanted to continue studying, her father told her that he had done everything in his power to fund her education, but now, she was going to have to be on her own because he had to look out for his own retirement as well. And I think that was a pretty fair way to deal with the situation, because if she wanted to pursue higher studies, that should have been on her own dime and not her father's, because by then, she was definitely old enough to be working. But she did not agree with that, and she believed that her dad should continue to fund her education for as long as she wants to study, and they had a lot of fights about it. As a result, she ended up spending a lot of time with my family because every time that she would end up fighting with her father, she would come to my mom and vent to her. I, personally, thought that my uncle was being quite reasonable, but I never said anything about it because Jade would come over to speak to my mom and not me, so it was not my place to comment. Anyway, one day she came home, unannounced, like she usually did, and my parents were not home. I don't remember exactly where they were, they had probably gone out for a party, but I remember being the only person back home. So when she showed up, I instantly told her that my mother was not there, and I thought that she would go away after that, but she decided to sit inside the living room because apparently, she just needed some time away from her father because they had just gotten into yet another horrible fight. To be honest, I had heard enough about her fights with her father because she used to be very loud when she would come over to talk to my mother, and I wasn't really interested in hearing it again. But since my mom was not there, she started venting to me about it, and I think she was expecting me to be just as sympathetic towards her as my mother had been, but I had very different opinions on the situation. So when she started ranting about her father again, I cut her off, and I told her that my mother might have fed into her delusions, but I thought that what my uncle was doing was perfectly reasonable. I told her that he had dedicated his entire life to raising her to be a competent and capable independent woman, so now it was her chance to prove him right, and if she really wanted to pursue a master's degree and then get a doctorate, she would have to do what everyone else does and pay for it all herself. She was also a STEM major, and I knew that whatever job she would eventually find, it would be enough for her to support herself. All she had to do was at least try, but she just kept insisting that it would be just too much for her to handle and she couldn't work as well as study. So I told her that if she had already made up her mind that it was impossible for her to start working and continue her education, then maybe she should just give up on higher studies. But it was really unfair of her to demand that her father continue to pay for everything, especially after he had done so much for her, and instead of being grateful for it, she was acting like he was the villain here. I guess she hadn't expected that reality check, and as soon as I said all of this to her, she started yelling at me and told me that I was a horrible human being and that I would never understand what she was going through because I was a privileged brat and didn't even deserve to have the support that I did. If I'm being honest, I thought she was more of a privileged brat than I was, but whatever. She yelled at me for a couple of minutes and then ran out of the house crying. I did not go after her because, like I said, I was not interested in hearing her cry about the same thing over and over again. But I definitely had not expected what happened after that, because the next day, I got accused of SA by her and my entire world turned upside down because of that one accusation. And now, when people are finally finding out that she had lied about everything, my family is blowing up my phone after not having spoken to me for the past 3 years. Anyway, the day after Jade and I had that fight, my parents woke me up in the morning, and I still remember everything as clearly as yesterday because it was probably the most traumatizing day of my life. They woke me up saying that my uncle and Jade were there to see me, and apparently, it was very important. I had no idea what had happened by then, but once I came downstairs, Jade started screaming about how I had sat her the previous night and started faking a breakdown. My uncle looked extremely disturbed and my parents were also very shocked. Since she was not in a condition to speak, at least she was pretending that she wasn't. My uncle was the one who did all the talking, and he told my parents that when she had come back home that day after she had fought with him, she had been crying relentlessly, and eventually, he had managed to actually get what had happened out of her. She had gone back home to her father and told him that apparently, since my parents were not at home, I had lured her in and then, well, done what she accused me of. He couldn't even look at me and my parents were also avoiding looking at me. I tried to protest and I tried to claim that I didn't do it, but nobody was listening to me. It was horrible because even though I hadn't done anything, people were already treating me like a criminal. Right in front of me, my parents started begging for forgiveness and told my uncle not to report me or to go public with this, and said that they were ready to do anything that it took to fix the situation. No matter how hard I cried out, my parents and my uncle completely ignored my existence in the room, and it got so frustrating, the way they were ignoring me and talking to each other, that I picked up a vase out of frustration and threw it at the wall just so they would pay attention to me. But that kind of backfired, because my dad lost his temper and grabbed me by the arm and dragged me to my room, and then shut me inside. I kept banging against the door until my fists and arms started hurting because there was no way I was going to let Jade get away with this. It was a huge lie to tell, and it might have even ruined my reputation, but unfortunately, my dad did not let me out of the room until my uncle and Jade had left. When he finally opened the door, I started crying immediately, and I tried to tell them that I hadn't done anything of the sort, but they told me that they had watched the security footage from the cameras outside our house and they knew that Jade had actually come over the previous evening and had run out of the house, crying, a couple of minutes later. And judging by the way she had run out crying, they had chosen to believe her. They said that Jade literally did not have any reason to lie about what had happened and told me that they were ashamed of the kind of son that they had raised. My mother was in tears and couldn't bring her out to say anything, but my dad told me that with every difficulty, they had managed to get my uncle and Jade to promise that they were not going to take any sort of legal action against me. But this meant that they would also have to promise them something in return, and Jade and my uncle had demanded that I be sent far, far away so that she wouldn't have to see me around and relive the traumatic experience. So after a lot of discussion, my dad decided that he was going to send me away to live with my great uncle who lives in Loa. He was the least liked family member because of his terrible attitude and anger issues, and my dad knew that I did not like him at all. But that was the place farthest away from my family, and my dad told me that this was the only solution. So now I just had to accept it, and not only were they going to send me away, but they had also told Jade that they were going to take away the college fund that they had set aside for me and give it all to her, just so they would keep it all quiet. I tried to protest, but there was no talking to them. And eventually, I gave up because I just didn't see the point of anything anymore, since even my own parents did not seem to trust me. I was also able to figure out that Jade had probably accused me falsely of such things, simply because she wanted something to hold against my parents so that she could extract money from them, because her own father would never accept help of any kind, especially financial, not even from his own family. Anyway, within a couple of days of that incident, I was all packed up and ready to leave, and my parents did not even bother to hug me or wish me goodbye. For the next couple of days, my parents pretended that I was not even at home and I was under house arrest, so I couldn't even say goodbye to any of my friends. They had taken away my phone and told me that if I did not go off the grid and practically disappeared from everybody's life, they would go with themselves and then my life would be ruined. So I was forced to cut ties with everyone from my past and move away from everything that I knew, all because of a lie that Jade had told. A couple of days after that incident, my great uncle showed up to pick me up and I was sent off to live with him in an exile of sorts. Since then, I have had no contact with anyone from my past, not my family and not my friends, and I've had to completely restart my life. When I first moved away with my great uncle, it was very difficult for me to adjust to his ways because he would constantly taunt me throughout the day, even though he didn't even know why I had been kicked out. But the fact that I had been kicked out was enough for him to hold it against me and constantly mock me about it. And I've already talked about how he had a terrible attitude and issues with anger, so I had to walk on eggshells around it. I knew that my parents were sending him money every month, but he still pretended like he was doing me a huge favor by letting me stay with him. I knew that I wouldn't be able to live with him, and after the first few weeks, I decided that there was no point in crying over spilled milk. My parents had cut me off and I was forbidden from having any contact with anyone from my previous life, so all I could do was make the best of the situation, and I decided to start applying for jobs. I couldn't go to college anyway. I knew that because even though I had been accepted into the college of my choice, I didn't have the money or the means to go there. So I started applying to jobs after a few weeks of moping around, and after a couple of interviews, I was finally able to get a job as a warehouse worker. It didn't pay much and I was miserable because of how physically draining the job was, but at least when I got my first salary, I was able to move out of my horrible great uncle's place. I was lucky enough to have a couple of coworkers around the same age as me, who were also struggling with money. We became close friends, and 3 of us decided to pitch in and get an apartment together. So that's how I was able to move out of my great uncle's house, and I didn't even bother to tell him because I knew that for him, it would be a good riddance anyway. After I moved out from his place, I never heard from any of my family members again. For the past 3 years, I've been living with the same people that I got my first apartment with, and we have all been incredibly lucky because after working for a few months in the warehouse, all 3 of us decided to continue looking for better opportunities, since we were always too physically exhausted. Over the past 3 years, we have changed a lot of jobs and have been putting aside money because all 3 of us want to go to college. They have also had their fair share of struggles, but that's not relevant. Anyway, right now, I'm working in sales and I'm making a decent amount, and I've been thinking about reapplying to colleges. As for my 2 friends, they are also doing well, and we have recently also moved into a bigger apartment in a much nicer neighborhood. But of course, now that things have started looking up for me, my family thinks that it's the perfect time to try and get back into my life. As I had said, I have had no contact with them for the past 3 years, so I was quite surprised when my dad reached out to me through email a few days back. I'm not active on any social media, since that had been one of the rules that my parents had set when they kicked me out, and I had been very paranoid about them spreading the story and ruining my reputation and life if I went against the rules, so I had stuck to it. My email address has not changed in the past 3 years, and I have never blocked them anywhere, even though they have. Anyway, I was very surprised to hear from him because, after everything that happened, I had genuinely not expected it. When I read the email, it was basically just an apology for everything that had happened over the past 3 years, and he wanted me to give him my address and contact info so that he could reach out to me properly. He had provided me with his own contact info as well, in case I wanted to reach out to him on my own time. The reason he was apologizing and trying to reach out to me in the first place at all was because Jade had finally realized that it was time that she told everyone the truth about what had really happened. She was on her deathbed, and I guess she had finally developed a conscience or something, but for whatever reason, she had decided to tell her father the truth about what had happened, and he had spoken to my parents. So after learning the truth, my parents decided to reach out to me once again. But coming on to what has happened with Jade, she has been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and it's very unlikely that she's going to make it. She's been suffering for the past 8 months, and her condition is only deteriorating, even though the treatment is still ongoing. And no, she wasn't even able to make good use of all the money that she received from my college fund after she screwed me over. She wasted it all away with her terrible life choices because instead of pursuing her master's degree, she decided to take a gap year with all that money and travel the world so she could expand her horizons and truly find herself. She came back around a year and a half ago, and she had already eaten away at more than half of her savings because she wanted to live luxuriously. So by the time she came back, she had very little money left and started asking my parents for more, but my uncle threatened to cut her off if she took any more money from my parents. So she was forced to give up on the idea of college because with whatever money she had left, she couldn't afford a master's degree without working, and that's not something that she wanted. But she still had some money left, so she could have put it to good use and at least worked to build more capital. However, I guess that year-long vacation had made her lazy and she was already pretty spoiled, so she went on to waste even more of her money by buying an apartment and continuing to live beyond her means, even though she still hadn't even started looking for a job. Finally, she was able to find a job about a year ago, but then she was diagnosed with cancer and had to quit, and now, she has had to sell the apartment and everything else that she bought because she needs the money. And I don't want to come off as insensitive, but after reading what had happened with her, I felt really great because she did not need any enemies since she herself was her own biggest enemy. Once I was done reading the email, I had to think about whether I wanted to get back in touch with my parents or not, and I decided to speak to my friends about it. This also meant that I finally had to tell them the truth about why I had been kicked out of my house by my parents, because initially, I had only told them that we had had a bunch of disagreements and that's why they had kicked me out, but I hadn't told them the real reason. But after that email, I finally discussed it with my friends because I really didn't have anybody else to speak to about it. I told them everything about Jade and how she had lied and thrown me under the bus. Then I told them all about my parents as well and how they had believed her over me. Not only had they kicked me out and sent me to live with the worst relative possible, but they had also forced me to cut everyone from my past off and had actually threatened to ruin my reputation themselves if I went against them. My friends could actually hardly believe what I was telling them while I was narrating everything to them, and after I was done, they told me that there was no way that they would get back in touch with my parents and forgive them if they were in my place. And I'm taking it seriously because it's coming from my closest friends and pretty much the only ones that I have at this point. I wouldn't have thought about it much if they had just told me not to get back in touch with my parents and just let it go, but they think that I should speak up about what happened to me because, for the past 3 years, I've been living in fear, even though I haven't really done anything. They are right. To be honest, I have had to give up so much of my life because somebody told a lie about me and my parents went with it. So if I want to reclaim that, I need to speak up about what happened to me. But before doing that, I decided to tell my parents that I was going to go with the story and the real version of what happened because people deserve to know. And I don't really care if Jade is on her deathbed or whatever, she ruined my life and now I'm gonna reclaim it. So I texted the number that my dad had sent me and I told him whatever I was going to do because I already had the screenshots of the email that he had sent me, confirming that Jade had been lying, so now I could post about it on social media. And forget about posting, I could finally have social media again. I wasn't asking him for permission, but I guess he misread the situation and now, he and my mother and even my uncle are blowing up my phone, requesting me not to do this because Jade already has been through a lot and she is suffering like never before. So she has already received her karma and I don't need to punish her even more. They want me not to go public with the truth because that's going to ruin her reputation, and they think that I can come back and return to everything that I left behind without telling people the truth about why I'd left in the first place and nobody's going to question it. And they're right, I can't do that. But I don't really think that I want to because Jade took away a huge part of my life, and even my friends think that it's perfectly within reason for me to post the truth. It's not to get back at her, it's just so that people know what has happened, and I don't think you think that there are a lot of reasonable excuses to disappear from everybody's life for 3 years and then come back again. Besides, I don't even plan on going back to the city, I'm content enough here. But I do miss my friends and a lot of my relatives who were good to me, so I think at least they deserve to know the truth. My parents and my uncle have been blowing up my phone relentlessly, though, which is the only thing that has been stopping me from posting. Jade is apparently not in good shape at all, and they have been practically begging me not to post about anything. So woulda if I went ahead anyway and posted the truth about why I'd had to leave everything behind for 3 years and expose my cousin, even though she's on her deathbed right now? Update 1. I did it, guys. I thought about it for a really long time. I consulted my friends again and again and repeatedly, and they told me the same thing. Jade and my family had taken away 3 years of my life that I could have spent normally, but I had to live in fear because of them, even though I hadn't actually done anything. It would be perfectly within reason for me to retaliate, regardless of what condition Jade was in. And a lot of comments here also believe the same thing. To be honest, at the end of the day, it was my own decision, but knowing that most people are going to back me up on this made me feel a lot better. It has been a week since my original post, and last night, I put up my post, narrating everything that has happened in my life and why exactly I have been off the grid and out of everybody's life for the past 3 years. Everyone who used to know me in the past, including my friends and relatives, has reached out to me to let me know that they are there for me and that they have missed me greatly for the past 3 years. I honestly believe it because I did receive a lot of emails from a lot of people in the first couple of months, but apparently, after that, my parents told everyone not to go looking for me because I wanted to be left alone because I had been through something very traumatizing and I need time and space to heal. So after the first few months of no contact, people stopped trying to reach out to me because they wanted to give me my space. All my friends told me that they had asked my parents about my whereabouts several times, but they had never revealed it, so they couldn't get in touch with me, and even a lot of my relatives told me that they had waited patiently for me to surface again. It actually made me cry a little, seeing how nobody had forgotten me and how ready everyone was to welcome me back. Most importantly, people have said that they had always found Jade very shady, but getting to know this was low, even by her standards. My parents and my uncle have had nothing to say so far, and I'm hoping that they stay out because I really don't want to speak to them. As for myself, I feel a lot more free and lightweight now that all of this is off my chest. So speaking up about what has happened with me was a good choice and I don't regret anything. Update 2. Hi. It has been a couple of days since I made that post, and my parents reached out to me yesterday to let me know that they are really disappointed in me because they had only requested one thing: that I let sleeping dogs lie and I come up with some excuse as to why I was missing for 3 years but not tell everyone the truth about what had happened because Jade deserves some peace and quiet, given her condition. Apparently, after my post, she has lost pretty much all of her friends, and not even anyone from the family is willing to speak to her anymore, as if it's my fault. It was shocking that even now, they care more about what Jade is going through than what their own son has been through in the past. An apology is never going to cut it, and I told them that I didn't care about their disappointment anymore. They had also let me down on multiple levels, and now, they had no right to expect anything from me. If Jade deserves some peace and quiet right now, just because she's sick with cancer, I could also say the same thing about myself, because when they kicked me out and sent me to live with my horrible great uncle, I was just 18, and yet, they had no sympathy or mercy for me. And at least I'm telling the truth, Jade had lied and she got away with it for 3 years. So now, I'm going to reclaim my life, and I'm not going to allow anyone to try and make me feel guilty about it. I told them never to contact me again, and that the only people they should be disappointed in are themselves. Then, I finally blocked them, something I should have done a really long time back, but I was scared and confused. However, I think speaking up about what has happened to me has given me a sense of closure, and now, I don't feel the pressure to deal with my parents anymore. They and their expectations can take a hike for all I care. Update 3. Hey. So I decided to finally visit my friends and family after 3 long years this weekend, and it was pretty much the best decision I had ever made. I also took my roommates along with me, for moral support more than anything else. And to be honest, they have also become so close that we are like brothers now, and I wanted them to meet my friends as well. Everyone's been getting along great, and my friends seem overjoyed to see me. I am actually even living with one of them right now because all of them got offended when I said that I was going to be staying in a hotel. I'm going to go back in a couple of days, but my heart is just so full of joy that I can't even explain it in words. My roommates and my old friends are all living together in one of my friends' houses, and we are having the time of our lives. I've also managed to meet quite a few of my relatives, and they've told me that they have cut off my parents, my uncle, and Jade, and they don't plan on having anything to do with these people ever again. And it makes me really happy that at the end of the day, people always are going to take a stand for what is right. I'm glad that I'm surrounded by people like this, who didn't forget me and love me more than my parents do. Parents canceled my engagement party because my sister had a breakup, so I got sad, but my aunt took my side and gave me something that made my whole family furious at me. 2 weeks ago, my boyfriend of 5 years, Caleb, 27F, proposed to me, 27F, and I said yes. When we told our families about it, they were obviously overjoyed, and my parents told me that they were going to throw an engagement party for us. But a few days ago, they just canceled the party without even consulting me first because my sister, Penelope, 25F, was going through a breakup. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't have had any issues paying for my own engagement party and hosting it myself, but my parents had promised something to me and they ended up not delivering on those promises, and that's why I was upset. If they had at least spoken to me before canceling everything, I would have been more understanding, but what they did was just weird. They just called me up and informed me that Penelope and her boyfriend had broken up a day before my parents had decided that it would be best to avoid even talking about the wedding in front of her until she was in a relationship again because she was pretty much devastated. And so, hosting an engagement party for us was out of the question. The party was supposed to be happening yesterday and the invitations had already gone out a week ago, but none of that ended up happening because my parents had already canceled everything without even speaking to me, and I was very upset with them. It might have been insensitive of me if Penelope had been with her boyfriend for a really long time, but they had only been dating for 8 months and she was kind of serious about him, but I don't think it's my fault that he wasn't. And the crazy thing was that the reason they had broken up was because Penelope had asked him if he planned on getting married to her anytime soon, after learning that I was engaged. That would have been a bit too much for any guy to handle, and I really can't even blame him for making a run for it because Penelope was taking things a little too fast for his taste and he had asked her to slow down several times, but she just didn't seem ready to listen to him. So I can't say that the breakup was his fault. Penelope should have used her common sense as well, and it seemed unfair for our parents to cancel my engagement party because of something stupid like this. I had told them that what they had done was not fair, and I had even referred to their reasons as stupid and petty, which made all of them pretty mad, and we got into a fight, and since then, we haven't been on speaking terms. I had provided a guest list to my parents for the invitations, but I ended up having to email them all myself and tell them that the party had been postponed indefinitely because I knew that I was definitely going to have that party. I just didn't know when, since now I would have to plan it all over again by myself. However, there was one person that all of us missed since neither of my parents invited them, and nor did I, and actually happened to be quite lucky for me because now, my family is regretting everything. The person that we missed was actually my aunt, my dad's older sister, since she pretty much lives off the grid. She has no social media and she only uses her email for official or formal work, never for personal use, so if somebody has to reach her, they have to call her like in old times, and even when we had to send her an invitation, we had to mail it to her physically and then call to confirm. But after we got into a fight and stuff, both my parents and I forgot to disinvite her, and she ended up showing up at my parents' house yesterday. And that was not good news for my parents because she's quite strict, and most importantly, she has a huge inheritance that my dad had been hoping to get his hands on. My father, 51M, is the youngest of 3 siblings, my aunt being the oldest, 62F, and I had an uncle in the middle, but he passed away a couple of years back. My aunt used to dote on my father because he was the youngest, and also because by the time he was born, my grandparents were in their late 30s, and let's just say that my dad was not exactly an unexpected pregnancy, so his parents were not able to give him the kind of attention that he required. That's where my aunt stepped in, and she was the one person who had always been there for my dad, ever since he was little. After they grew up, she never got married or had a family of her own, but she had made a lot of money while she had been working, and even now, she was running her own business, so my dad had been hoping to inherit all of that when she passed away. It was something that my aunt had even discussed with my dad, and he knew that if she had to name somebody as her heir, it would be him. But now, all of that's been thrown into jeopardy, and that's because they decided to be honest with her about why the party had been cancelled when she showed up at the house last evening. My parents had obviously expected everyone to believe that what they had done was quite reasonable and understandable, but like most normal people, my aunt called them out and told them that she couldn't believe that they would treat me like this. Then, she decided to come over to my place, and I obviously welcomed her with open arms because she and I get along really well, and even though we don't really get to speak often, we only talk whenever I call her up to check up on her. It's always great to talk to her. When she came over, I hadn't actually planned on telling her anything about the fallout that I had with my parents, but she was the one who brought it up, and she told me that what had happened, I shouldn't invite them to any of my wedding events since they clearly don't respect me. I was a little shocked by that because all my life, I had only seen her getting along great with my dad, but last night, she seemed very upset. Then I asked her what was going on, since it felt like there was something much deeper than the issue at hand, so she told me that being the older sibling, she had had to sacrifice a lot, and her parents had never appreciated it because they believed that as the older sibling, it was her duty to make sure that she put her brothers before herself. And that's what she had believed her entire life, but now, she regrets not taking out enough time for herself because she realized that most of the time, it's only her trying to talk to my dad, but he never reaches out to her by himself unless he needs her help for something. She has tried to comfort herself by telling herself that he has a family to care for, so he can't obviously take out as much time for her as she can take out for him, but even then, it still feels bad. And I totally understand where she's coming from because I think that my dad doesn't speak to her or visit her as often as he should. Also, both my sister and I are grown-ups now, and I don't think he can use his family as an excuse because we are doing pretty well on our own. My aunt also told me that when she was younger, and when her parents were still around, even they had a favorite golden child, and it was not her or my dad, it was the middle child. Her younger brother was their favorite because he was a boy, and it could have just as easily been my father too, but he was too young at the time. All her life, she has felt like she's been dealt the short end of the straw by both her parents and her siblings, and now, she felt like it was her duty to tell me that I shouldn't make the same mistakes and I shouldn't take the same kind of disrespect like she did. Because once I start forgiving people just because they're family, they start to take advantage of it, and eventually, it reaches a point where you can't go back from. And while she was talking about all of this, I really felt it because that's what I had been about to do as well, but after that conversation with her, I decided to take her advice. All cards on the table, I'd actually thought that by the time that my wedding actually came around, I would have been able to make it right with my family again. I didn't know how. I guess I just assumed that they would apologize to me, and if they didn't, I would just let it go because I really wanted them to be present at my wedding. But after speaking to my aunt, I realized that I wasn't fine with what they had done, and I needed them to acknowledge and apologize for it. Until that happened, I wasn't interested in having them be a part of my life. And I definitely did not want to end up as a doormat for my family, and invite them to my wedding, regardless of how they had behaved with me. So after my aunt's visit last night, I decided to send a message to my parents and Penelope and tell them that until they acknowledged and apologized for their behavior, I was not interested in having them be a part of my wedding in any capacity, and I would appreciate it if they stayed away. This morning, after I sent that message, I told my aunt that I had set a boundary, and she told me that she really was proud of me and hoped that I would be able to fix the situation with my family eventually, but until then, I need to stand my ground and not let them walk all over me. She had spent the night here, since she lives quite far away, and I didn't want her driving back home last evening. So this morning, when we spoke, it was in person, and after that, she left, and she also told me how disappointed she was that after she had scolded her brother last night, he didn't even bother to call her to make amends with her, and I could really understand that both of us were very upset with our families. And then, a few hours back, my dad showed up at my door to ask me if my aunt was still here or not, and I had to tell him that she had already left in the morning, and she had been very disappointed that he hadn't even bothered to call to talk to her and try to mend things after fighting with her last night. All of a sudden, when I said that, he flared up and he started screaming at me from outside the door and told me that this was all my fault and that he was sure that I was the one who had instigated my aunt against him because just now, she had called him and told him that given his recent behavior, she had changed her mind about including him in her will and had decided that she was going to leave everything to me instead. It was a huge deal because, as I said, the inheritance that she was going to be leaving is pretty massive, and my dad had always expected that it would come to him. But now, he was being disappointed because of his own behavior with her. I lost my phone at him as well, and I told him that he had no right to yell at me, especially when it was his own behavior with her that had led to this situation. If he had just had the decency to at least try and speak to his sister after she left his house last night, then maybe this wouldn't have happened at all. I didn't even tell him that he had to apologize to me. All he had to do was talk to my aunt, but he couldn't even be bothered to do that much. Even today, the only reason he had come all the way to my house was because my aunt had sent him a message saying that she would disown him, and not because he actually cared about her as a person. I told him that he deserved this, and for the past many years, everyone had noticed that it was always she who had tried to keep in touch with him, and he had barely cared about her, so now he has no right to complain. And he also didn't have any right to try and make me the bad guy here, especially after what my parents had done with the whole cancellation of the engagement party and stuff. I told him that I didn't have to say anything to my aunt to turn her against them. She was already pretty upset with them when she came by, and in fact, it was she who told me not to have any ties with them until they apologized. So, I didn't really have to try and badmouth them to make them look like the bad guys to my aunt. They had done that job well enough themselves. My father seemed quite surprised when I told him about all of this, and his initial instinct was obviously to accuse me of lying because it was just impossible for him to believe that his dear sister would ever say anything against him. But he had screwed things up for himself, but his behavior, so I had nothing else to say to him. I told him to leave, but instead of just going away, he started crying on my doorstep and told me that I had turned the only family he had against him. He seemed genuinely upset, and he told me that what he had done with regards to canceling the party and stuff was not even as bad as what I had done, and told me that if my aunt seemed upset with him, the least I could have done was try to contact him, and told him to come over so we could all sort things out as a family. I had never heard my father crying the way that he was this morning, and I haven't been able to get it out of my head, even though he left after a couple of minutes. And now I feel guilty because I feel like a lot of problems would have just been solved if I contacted him last evening, and we all sat together as a family and tried to clear the air, but instead, I just vented to my aunt. I cheated the same. I guess that made us more bitter or something, but again, I don't really see anything wrong with what I did, but I still feel guilty. My fiancé doesn't think that we did anything wrong, but I still want to get a second opinion. So Ida for not calling my father over so he could sort things out with my aunt and I? Edit. So my parents haven't always had a favorite, and honestly, they were very different up until a few years back. The reason that I had even bothered to have a relationship with my parents for so long is because growing up, they were very different, and right now, they're very different. Growing up, my sister and I were always treated equally, and Penelope did not get preferential treatment just because she was younger. It's only recently that things have started changing, and I was scared of giving up on my parents so quickly because after all, family is all that you have, and I was under the impression that it's just a phase and they are going to go back to treating us normally again. Now, obviously, that seems a bit unlikely. But yes, my relationship with my parents earlier had been pretty normal, and that's why I'd even agreed to let them host an engagement party for me. As for why they have started treating us differently now, for the past couple of years, I don't really know. If I had to pinpoint it, I guess it started around the time that Penelope graduated from college, but because COVID hit, she was unable to get a job and she was pretty depressed for a whole year, and there were days when she wasn't even able to get out of bed. At the time, she had been living with our parents, and I had been staying with my boyfriend. And because of the quarantine and everything, we couldn't even see each other that often and had to stick to video calls. But I guess that made my parents a little softer towards Penelope because she's obviously a lot more fragile than I am, but I think they forgot that they have 2 daughters and both of us need them equally to be there for us. It's not just her that has to be taken care of. It's a bit disappointing, but it's not like I can help the situation. And even my relationship with Penelope has been affected because of this, because I guess she has started to think of herself as more important than me, just because our parents treat her like that. Earlier, we used to have a normal sibling relationship, and yes, we did have a certain degree of sibling rivalry, but it was nothing out of hand. Recently, though, she has started becoming a lot more of a brat, and it's just upsetting. I had managed to ignore this change for the past couple of years, but now, I don't think I can do that. Update 1. So thank you so much for reaching out to me with all the comments and advice. I have decided that I don't have to get in touch with my dad or apologize to him or whatever. I don't know why he thought that I owed it to him to contact him and try to say things right with him when my aunt came over to speak to me, because he had the opportunity to do it himself, because before she came over to my place, she had been there with them. And he could have just acknowledged the fact that he had made a mistake and apologized to me and cleared with her. But he chose not to do that and stuck to his decision of acting as if whatever he had done was perfectly justified. So for him to try and blame me for the situation right now is just ridiculous. And it's been a couple of days now, but earlier, it had only been my father who had shown up at my door and had been blaming me for whatever had happened. But now, both my parents and Penelope are accusing me of sabotaging his relationship with his sister on purpose and brainwashing her against him. Luckily, they haven't shown up at my doorstep yet, but I don't think there's anything stopping them for long. It's also very upsetting because my dad knows the truth, and my dad knows that I didn't say anything to turn my aunt against them. She was already quite miffed with them when she came over. She herself had said to him on the phone call that it was his behavior that had upset her, and I didn't have anything to do with it. But still, they're trying to make this all about me and make me look like the bad guy who is out for revenge. It's just petty, and I know that they are doing this to get on my nerves, and they are succeeding. I have even blocked them, but even then, they have found ways to annoy me by using burner phones and social media accounts. At this point, I don't even know what they want from me, because I don't think an apology is what they need. I have spoken to Caleb about it, and he thinks that my parents want me to speak to my aunt and try and make things right with them, and until that happens, they're just going to try and keep getting on my nerves. And I think he's right, but there is no way that I'm going to contact my aunt and tell her to speak to these people, because I don't want to do it myself, so why would I want her in that position? I guess I'm just gonna have to tough it out and deal with it until they get it. And I'm fine with it, as long as they stay away from me and don't show up in person now. Update 2. So since harassing me on social media wasn't going to cut it, my family decided that they were going to go public with their hate against me and started recruiting people. Apparently, from what I have learned from a couple of relatives, they have been sending messages to and telling them that I invite them to any event in the future. They must decline because I'm really hateful and petty person, and I have brainwashed my aunt against them by feeding her a bunch of lies. They have been telling people that my parents had kindly and politely requested me to postpone the engagement party because my sister had just been through a terrible breakup. But instead of respecting their wishes, I decided to go through with the party anyway. But since my parents did not want that, they had decided to tell me that if I wanted to have the party, then I would have to fund it myself. And apparently, I threw a hissy fit over that, and then I called my aunt to come over, and then I started brainwashing her against my dad, and now, not even my aunt is willing to speak to him anymore. Obviously that paints me in a very bad light, especially given the fact that they were making it seem like I'd asked them to pay for my engagement party in the first place, but I hadn't. They are the ones who had offered it. So I spent the last couple of days clarifying and telling everyone the truth, every time somebody was reaching out to me to confirm the story. It got tiring after a while, so I decided to put out a statement on my social media account as well, because I didn't want to have to constantly clear the air with other people. And so far, I have been trying to avoid contacting my aunt and telling her about any of this, because she doesn't really have any social media, and I know that she likes staying away from all of this. But I felt like things were getting to a point where it was becoming too much for me to handle. So I had to reach out to her, and I had to tell her what was going on, so she could take a stand for me as well and tell people that I hadn't done any brainwashing. It was her own decision to cut my dad out of her life because he was the one who did not respect her. After speaking to my aunt and letting her know what was going on, she told me that she was going to speak to my father and tell him that what he was doing was just going to make her push him even farther away. She also told me not to worry, and that she would make a profile on Facebook specifically for this purpose if that's what it took. But she was going to make sure that everyone in the family knew that it was not me who had created the situation, but it had been my father. That made me feel loads better, and she stayed true to her word and created an account on Facebook specifically so she could upload a video talking about what had happened, and everyone in the family saw that. After watching that, people started reaching out to me and telling me that they were definitely on my side here and were going to cut my father out of their lives because whatever was going on with him was not nice or acceptable. Having issues with me was one thing, but publicizing them and trying to make it seem like I was the bad guy here was another, and nobody in the family was going to stand for it. And I'm pretty happy that I have a family like this, who have a spine and are ready to take stand for me when it is necessary. My dad had always been well liked by everyone, so I had actually initially been very skeptical if people would even be willing to believe my side of the story, but I'm glad that people are willing to stand by what's right. My family has had nothing to say about any of this, and a couple of hours ago, I started hearing from people that all of them had deactivated their accounts, probably because they thought that being active on any social media would make them answerable to their family. I don't care about any of it. I'm just happy that my side of the story is out and nobody can accuse me of being the villain anymore. And even if people want to do so even now, it's their problem and not mine. I have said whatever I had to say, and now, I'm not willing to deal with this anymore because I have a wedding to plan, and I'm not going to waste my energy on petty stuff like this. Caleb and I have had a discussion about this, and in a couple of days, we are going to take down all the posts that we had put up in relation to this, because now that everything's out in the open, it's not important to us anymore. My aunt has also told me that she's going to delete the account that she has created in a couple of days because this really isn't that important and all of us want the negativity out of our lives now. She told me that after this, even if my family tried to get back in touch with me, whether to fight or to apologize, I should just let it go and not speak to them, and it would be for the best. And I couldn't agree more. Update 3. Hi, guys. So I'm getting married in a couple of weeks and I recently sent out the invitations to my wedding. Obviously, my parents and my sister did not receive one because after we had our falling out, they never bothered to reach out to me to try and make things right, and honestly, even if they had tried, I don't think I would have been open to it because they had tried to spread some nasty rumors about me in the family to make me look like the bad guy and all that drama had happened. After that, pretty much everyone in the family had stopped speaking to my parents and Penelope and they reactivated their accounts a couple of days after everything had died down and even tried to start the hate campaign against me, but nobody was falling for it anymore. Since that, things have mostly stayed quiet and I'm very glad about it because I've been very busy planning my wedding. To be honest, I hadn't even been thinking about my family for the past couple of months, and it only occurred to me that I haven't spoken to them for so long because the invitations were sent out recently, and I realized that I hadn't sent any to my parents or Penelope and it felt weird, but there's nothing that I can do. Over the past couple of months, my aunt and I have become a lot closer and I decided to speak to her about how I was feeling and she told me that it was perfectly normal for me to feel like I was missing out on something because I actually was. I was going to miss out on the experience of having my family beside me while I was getting married and it was perfectly fine for me to feel bad about it, but the only thing that I needed to remember was that my family had not exactly treated me well and that's why they were not going to be there at the wedding and it was quite effective for me to think of that way. So I wouldn't say that I don't care that my family is not going to be there on my wedding day. I do care, but it's not like I can help this situation, so the only thing that I can do is just deal with it. And regardless of that, I'm still gonna have a lot of people by my side, who actually care about me, like Caleb and my aunt and other family members. So I know that no matter what, it's going to be a success. Sister tried to steal my boyfriend and hit me 6 years ago. We hadn't spoken since. But at my bridal shower party, my parents invited my estranged sister and tried to force us to make up. I, 28F, haven't been on speaking terms with my sister, 26F, for almost 6 years now after one really terrible incident that I will get to in a while. My sister and I always had really intense sibling rivalry growing up, and for some reason, my parents never did anything to discourage that. They would actually egg us on to compete more. I think it was not a good move because that made us really jealous of each other and I feel like if they had nipped it in the bud, maybe things would have been better between us. When we were kids, at least we would be able to put our differences aside for some time, but as we grew up, we started resenting each other more. By the time we were in high school, we barely even spoke to each other and that was how we liked it. Then I moved out for college and I would only have to see my sister when I would come back home, so that was slightly better than having someone be hostile around you all the time. Around the time that I was supposed to be graduating, I started dating my fiancé. We had been friends for 3 years of college, and before we graduated, he finally worked up the nerve to ask me out, and I said yes because I really liked him too. After we graduated, I got an apartment with him because we had already been friends for 3 years and we didn't think it was a big deal. Once we had completed 3 months together, I decided to introduce him to my parents and took him home with me for dinner one weekend. That was around the time that my sister had also started college, but coincidentally, she had also decided to come back home for the weekend, so we were both there together and it was already a recipe for disaster. My life was going pretty great at that point because I had started working, I had my own apartment and of course, I had a really loving boyfriend. Unfortunately, my sister wasn't doing all that well. She hadn't been able to get into her first choice and had to settle for her second, so she was already pretty unhappy about that. And later on, I learned from my parents that she was really struggling to make friends in college, which is why she was coming back home every weekend so frequently. Anyway, when I introduced my boyfriend to my parents, I could see that my sister was not happy about this at all, so she just sulked in the background. My boyfriend knew about my strained relationship with me, but even then, with great difficulty, I managed to introduce her to him as my sister. And when I introduced her, some magical change seemed to have come over her, and she turned on her charm. I tried not to be bothered by it, but it was really weird, and after that, she became a different person altogether. While we were all sitting around and chatting, she kept trying to talk to my boyfriend and expressed a lot of interest in his life. I think both he and I were a bit creeped out by her behavior, but said nothing. But while we were having dinner, she started crossing a line because she started flirting with him right in front of me. She wasn't even being subtle about it. It was very obvious and I could tell that she was just doing this to piss me off. I tried to ignore it for a couple of seconds because I really didn't want my boyfriend to see how dysfunctional our family was, but I just couldn't control my temper at one point. So I just snapped and told my sister to cut it out because he was my boyfriend and it was gross that she was throwing herself at him like this. She just rolled her eyes at me and went back to trying to talk to him. So I started yelling at her and said that he was a guest and more importantly, he was my guest, so she needed to be more respectful because she was creeping him out. and I remember she told me that she could tell that my boyfriend deserved better and she was just helping him out by letting him know that there were other options than me. The way she said it really ticked me off and I started cursing at her and she started cursing back. Then, I guess I called her a loser at one point and said that she was only bitter because I was not doing as badly as her and that really got under her skin. Because at that point, she grabbed my hair across the table, dragged me to her side and slapped me senseless. I couldn't even stop it because I was so shocked that she had physically attacked me because usually, we had tried to keep our hands to ourselves after we crossed middle school. But after she attacked me, it turned into a full-blown brawl, and our parents and my boyfriend had to drag us off each other because we were vicious. By the end of it, both of us were really injured and all scratched up, but we were still yelling at each other. My boyfriend was the one to drag me away, come and get me inside the car, and then drive us back home while trying to calm me down all the way back. I was really worked up, so I was glad to have him by my side because otherwise, that fight might have gone on for much longer. Anyway, this was the incident after which I stopped speaking to my sister entirely. We had had fights before that as well, but none as nasty as that, and it was pretty much the last straw for me, and if I'm being honest, I was already living away from her, so I did not feel obliged to consider her as a part of my family anymore. The day after that incident, my parents called me up to let me know that they had told my sister off, and even though she was not ready to apologize to me just yet, they were hoping that we would be able to sort it out at some point. I was the one to tell them that I was not interested in sorting it out with her. I wanted things to remain bad between us because I really didn't want anything to do with her anymore. They tried to change my mind, but I told them that part of this was their own doing because right from our childhood, they had never done anything to acknowledge the crazy sibling rivalry we had and had actually encouraged it. So now, they had no right to be surprised that we did not want each other in our lives. They didn't agree with me that day and we ended up arguing, but a couple of days later, they called me up again to tell me that they had realized the mistake and wanted to apologize for it. It was a bit pointless at that stage, but I still forgave them because I was already not going to be speaking to my sister. I didn't want to lose my relationship with my parents as well. Now, 6 years have passed since that incident and I haven't had any contact with my sister, but I know that my parents have been in touch with her and have a fairly normal relationship with her, which I don't really care about. As long as they were not forcing me to fix my relationship with her, I was cool with it. I have seen her at other family events and stuff, but we never speak, and even when we meet over the holidays, we tend to avoid each other, and that's how I like it. Everyone in the family knows that we don't have a good relationship, but nobody really knows why. They just know that we had a fight. They don't know the specific details, and I intended on keeping it that way because neither of us came out looking good in that incident. So for almost 6 years, I had never spoken to my family about this, but recently, the truth came out at my bridal shower. My maid of honor had only invited a couple of close family members, and of course, my bridesmaids. My fiancée was also there since we weren't going the traditional way and sticking to only inviting female members. I wanted all my favorite people there, but for some reason, my parents decided to go out of their way to invite my estranged sister to the event as well. I genuinely don't know what they were thinking, but when they walked in with my sister beside them, I was really shocked for a couple of seconds, and to my surprise, my sister looked equally shocked to see me there as well. Everyone else in the room had fallen silent when they walked in, and it was so weird because it really felt like a standoff. After what seemed like an eternity, my parents finally walked up to me and they addressed both my sister and I. They said that 6 years had passed since that incident and a lot of things have changed since then. The most important one was the fact that we were both much older and a lot more mature, so they expected us to deal with this situation maturely and make amends with each other. By the look on her face, it was clear that my parents had lied to my sister to bring her here. And before she could say anything, I told my parents that they had no right to do this on a day that was important for me, and I politely asked them to leave along with my sister. I was trying to behave in a dignified manner because I didn't want to put a damper on the event, but my parents did not leave and they told me to let the past go. I guess that really rubbed me the wrong way because they were making it sound like nothing important had happened and it would be very easy for me to just let it go. So just to refresh their memory and let everyone else know what exactly had happened 6 years back, I repeated the entire incident and then asked the room if they thought that this was something that I could just let go of. It would have been a different story if I was getting married to somebody else, but I was getting married to the same guy whom my sister had tried hitting on when I had first brought him home to meet my family. And she had done it shamelessly, right in front of me, and treated him like some part of a competition that he had never agreed to be in the first place. Most importantly, after doing all of that, she was the one who had attacked me first just because I had called her out on her behavior and said that she was a loser. It had been pretty traumatizing for me because, before that, I had never had anyone try to beat me up like that. Even after that, she had never once apologized to me in these past 6 years and had pretended like nothing had ever happened. So I really didn't find it necessary for me to forgive her and let the past go because I thought it was more important for me to hold on to the past, so I did not ever let somebody like her back into my life. And it was ridiculous of my parents to think that they could just show up with her at my bridal shower and expect both of us to go along with it. My parents were about to argue some more with me, but thankfully, my sister came to her senses and walked out. I guess she was not happy about being lied to either, so my mother went after her, probably to pacify her. My father stayed back with me for a couple of seconds, but I told him that I did not want to speak to him right now because he had really let me down. Then, he started looking pissed off and said that I was being unreasonable and that if something happened 6 years ago, it doesn't make sense to keep holding on to it and acting like a brat over it. Personally, I don't think I was acting like a brat, but at that point, I had no interest in arguing with my father and trying to prove myself right, so I just told him to leave. And after a couple of minutes, he left as well. I had to excuse myself for a couple of minutes afterward to compose myself because I was kind of overwhelmed. Thankfully, my fiancé and my maid of honor were right there for me and I was back to normal within a couple of minutes. After that, we resumed the event as if nothing had happened and everyone else played along since they could understand that I did not want to think about my parents or my sister and needed something to distract myself. Then, once the event was done, I went back home with my fiancé and we didn't speak about that incident afterward. This had happened about 5 days back and I hadn't heard from my parents since then, but I was fine with it because after what they had done, I thought it was better for us to have some time apart. I didn't even think that they were going to contact me by themselves anytime soon, but they did. Unfortunately, it was not to apologize, but to blame me for the situation that my sister is in right now. This morning, I received a phone call from my mother, and as soon as I answered it, she told me that I absolutely had to speak to my aunt to make sure that she gave the position that she had been talking about to my sister and nobody else. She sounded hysterical and very panicked, and I had no idea what he was even talking about, so I had to ask her to back up. Then, she explained to me that my sister had apparently been unemployed for about 6 months now since her previous company had laid a lot of employees off due to downsizing, and a couple of weeks back, she realized that she didn't even have enough money to cover rent anymore, so she had to move back in with our parents and she has been looking for a job, but she can't find anything that she likes and that pays well enough. My mother had spoken to my aunt about this, and since my aunt was starting a new business, she had decided to hire my sister as the head of marketing since that's the department where my sister had been working previously. But after the incident at my bridal shower, where I spoke about what had happened 6 years ago, my aunt had stopped responding to them and had eventually rescinded the offer. That wasn't surprising in the slightest because I had always been my aunt's favorite. Also, when my mother forwarded me the message that my aunt had sent her, I thought it was a pretty reasonable excuse. She had said that from whatever she had gathered from the incident that I had narrated at the party, it was obvious that my sister had serious anger issues. And the fact that she hadn't even apologized for it, not even at the bridal shower, that did not sit right with my aunt, and her behavior was just all off. There was a more qualified candidate for this position whom she had interviewed a few weeks back but had decided to give the job to my sister because she was family. However, she has changed her mind now and the job is going to go to the more qualified candidate. I thought it was completely fair and I was actually pretty glad my aunt had changed her mind because otherwise, my sister would have been nepotism hired. And as somebody who has had to face the consequences of nepotism in the workplace, I didn't want my aunt to be the kind of person who is a part of the problem. So when I read that message, I told my mother that I didn't think that I could do anything about it because it seemed like my aunt had found somebody who was actually fit for the job and more than anything else, that was the reason that my sister was not being hired. I told her that I wouldn't be speaking to my aunt because this was her professional life, and I didn't want to overstep my boundaries. But my mother started losing her mind and began to yell at me, accusing me of sabotaging my sister on purpose by ruining her reputation and image in front of our family. She told me that on the day of my bridal shower, I had absolutely no need to talk about the incident that had taken place although years ago since I hadn't spoken about it for so long. I could have just kept a secret, but she said that I actively wanted to portray my sister as unstable and evil and that's why I had narrated that incident, so I could seek sympathy from the rest of the family and make myself look like the good guy, even though it was me who had instigated that fight by calling my sister a loser, especially when I knew that it would hit her where it hurts. Just for the record, while I was narrating the incident, I had mentioned the fact that I was the one who had called her a loser, after which she attacked me, so it wasn't like I was hiding anything. But even then, I don't think calling her names was something that justified how she got physical, and for my mother to claim that I had talked about that incident on purpose to ruin her image was simply just unfair. So I hung up and I blocked my parents, but I've been thinking about it and I feel like I need to know for sure that talking about that incident was not a bad move. While on the phone call, my mother claimed that my sister was a changed person now, but I hadn't even given her a chance and that was really nasty of me. So Ida for talking about an incident where my sister had attacked me 6 years back which led to her losing out on a job offer? Update 1. Hello, Reddit. Before I get into what happened after I made my original post, I just want to thank everyone who took time from their day to comment on my post. Thank you for all the advice and the kind comments, it really means a lot to me. Now, coming to what happened after I blocked my parents. My sister, obviously, has been blocked for the past 6 years, so she couldn't contact me, and now, neither could my parents. With no other way left to contact me, they decided to visit me. I'm getting married in a couple of weeks, so I really don't have time to deal with all of this. I have a lot on my plate as it is, so when they showed up, I told them to leave because I'd just come back home from work and my fiancé and I had to head out immediately afterward to meet with my designer for a last-minute fitting of my wedding dress. So they had just shown up at the wrong time and we were about to leave, but we couldn't even get out of the house as long as they were standing outside the door because I knew that they would find a way to keep me talking to them and annoying me. I even threatened to call the cops on them, but that did not get them to leave either. And honestly, I didn't want to call the cops because I felt like that would be a little too much and I didn't want to be one of those people who called the cops for every little thing. So after speaking to my fiancée, we quickly decided to let them in, talk to them, and get to know what they wanted, and then we could be on our way. Once we had decided that, we opened the door, invited them in, and told them to make it quick because we had places to be. Thankfully, my parents came straight to the point and told me that because of what I had done at my brother's shower, my aunt had rescinded her offer to hire my sister, and since this was technically my fault, I had to be the way to speak to her and make sure that she got a job one way or the other. It was just the same argument again and I didn't want to keep talking in circles, so I told them that I had already discussed this with my mother on the phone and I had told her that I couldn't do anything about this. So showing up at my house to talk about it once more seemed kind of pointless, especially when I was getting married in a couple of weeks and they knew that I was really busy. Then, my sister interrupted and said that talking about the job offer was not the only purpose of the visit, and that kind of surprised me because that was the first time we had actually spoken to each other in 6 years. Anyway, she continued speaking and told me that the real reason that they were here was because of her, since she felt like she really owed me an apology. I honestly don't even know what to tell you guys because I'm still not sure about what I felt at that moment. I was very doubtful of her intentions because I obviously don't trust her. So I decided to be very straightforward with her, and I asked her if she was only here to apologize because she thought that I would be able to help her get the job or if she genuinely wanted to apologize to me. Because if she was only here to apologize because she thought I could get her the job, then there was no need for her to waste her breath because it would not be possible for me. She was a bit surprised by how cutthroat I was but managed to tell me that it was only our parents over here to talk about the job, but she had actually come all the way here to apologize. When I looked at my parents, even they seemed surprised, so this was clearly not something that they had discussed. But my sister did not seem to care about it. She told me that she didn't even care about the job and she was only here to tell me that she had thought about her behavior towards me for a really long time over these past 6 years. And she always found some excuse to not apologize to me, but after the bridal shower, she could no longer run away from the truth, that she had in fact, treated me really badly. I could tell by her behavior and tone that she was serious and both my fiancé and I are still struggling to process it. She told me that right from her childhood, she felt like she had to me at everything, and that made her very resentful of me. She realized that she had spent her entire childhood and teenagers competing with me for absolutely no reason because in the real world, it didn't even matter and nobody seemed to care. And she regretted all of it because she could have just as easily been friends with me since I had tried to be her friend several times, but she had been the one who rebuffed me because she always saw me as competition. It was insane to hear her say all of that because that's exactly how I had felt and I don't want to say it, but I kind of started tearing up when she was sharing that experience. Then, she addressed my fiancé and told him that she was also really apologetic for how she had behaved with him the first and last time that they had interacted. She got so caught up in trying to beat me that she didn't even realize what kind of a disgusting person she had become, and this apology was long overdue. After she was done talking, she didn't even wait for us to say anything, and just said that it was not necessary for us to forgive her, she just wanted to get it out of her system, and now that she had, she was going to let us be on our way. So she walked out and then it was just me, my fiancé, and my parents in the room who were sitting in absolute shock, trying to make sense of what just happened because we really hadn't seen any of this coming. After a while, even my parents left without a word and my fiancé and I headed out a couple of minutes later for the fitting. We didn't even discuss any of this until we had come back home, and only about half an hour ago did we finally get to talking about my sister and what she had said. I thought that it was incredibly mature of her to finally apologize, even though it had taken her 6 years to do so. And judging by her behavior, she had meant every word of it. So right now, we are trying to figure out whether we forgive her or not. It's too soon to tell because we haven't even started processing all of this yet. My fiancé and I are inclined towards contacting her later and telling her that we forgive her. I have already unblocked her, I just need some more time to tell her that it's fine. But one thing I'm really glad about, even though it took her many years, at least she was able to realize that we could have been friends. Update 2. Hey, so I just realized that I hadn't mentioned what I was planning on doing regarding the situation with my parents in my last update. To be honest, I was so caught up with the situation with my sister, that it completely slipped my mind. Anyway, it's been a couple of days since we last met them and they haven't bothered to reach out to us since then. And I don't think they're sorry about anything, so we're gonna continue not speaking to them. Honestly, I blame my parents for a lot of things, including how the situation turned out between my sister and me. And even now, they had the chance to be better parents, but they completely screwed it up. I had tried really hard to keep them around as a part of my life, but they've always made it quite impossible. In the past 6 years, we had had many fights and arguments, but I always tried to forgive them, but now, I can't do that anymore. I can't keep making excuses for people who so clearly don't care about my feelings. Or even my sisters, if I'm being honest. The bottom line is that we are not going to be speaking to them, and I don't think they're going to be attending my wedding anyway. But just to be on the safe side, my fiancé and I are going to reach out to them in a couple of days and tell them that they are no longer welcome there. So that's that about that. Update 3. Hey, guys. So I got married last week. I had a wonderful time and everything was really beautiful and dreamy, exactly the way I had imagined it to be. My parents, just as I had expected, did not end up attending. My husband and I didn't even need to reach out to them. They sent me an email saying that they wouldn't be attending because there had clearly been some sort of terrible misunderstanding, and because of that, both my sister and I have started villainizing them. And they don't need to be told that we hold them responsible for the kind of relationship that we have, even though they had tried their best to be good parents to us. So now, they plan on taking some time away from us and are going to live their separate lives without bothering to constantly think about their daughters since we don't appreciate their presence in our lives. I mean, I'm fine with that if that's what they want. On a happier note, I did reach out to my sister a couple of days after I posted my last update and I told her that I accepted her apology and I would love for her to be present at my wedding. She graciously accepted my invitation and showed up at the wedding and it was just a really happy day. It's crazy to think that a couple of months ago, if somebody had told me that my parents would not be present at my wedding, but my sister would, I would have laughed in their faces, but here we are now. Anyway, I'm just happy that everything went smoothly and I'm finally rebuilding my relationship with my sister now. Maybe someday my parents will come to their senses and apologize to us, but for now, this is enough for me. My husband and I are going to be leaving for our honeymoon pretty soon, and life has never been better.
Anyone asks, tell them Dempsey is packing heat.
Sister said my rich doctor fiancé and baby trapped him years ago. Now she's begging me to save his career after he botched the surgery, even offering a favor in return. This is about my sister, Carol. Well, I'm gonna call her by her real name, because who cares? There's no better way of saying this, but yeah, Carol lured my fiancé into her skirts because she felt he was too handsome and rich for a plain-looking girl. Me. She thought he deserved someone gorgeous, so she offered herself and that dumbass Dick married her. Good for them because I got rid of a cheater and found someone who actually deserved me. Hear me out, this is gonna be a long one because it goes back from 15 years ago when I was in my mid-20s. Now I am 41. Carol is 6 years younger to me and a complete opposite personality. She's that girl who gets the most attention in all family and social gatherings. And she ensured that she got one. Right from our childhood, she was more focused on getting dressed up and hanging out with friends. No doubt, she's pretty and what you call dead drop gorgeous and she's proud of it. She leaves no opportunity to flaunt her superficial beauty and look down upon others who don't fit her beauty standard, like me. She was always critical of my dressing sense and made fun of my not-so-social nature. As a kid, I was more inclined towards academia, so I was mostly seen with my books and comics instead of putting makeup on my Barbie. I didn't even own a Barbie. Carol and I never shared a sisterly bond. She considered herself to be a fashionista while I was a plain-looking girl. That's what she called me, plain. Well, she was right to an extent. I'm a simple woman, with no pomp and show, no over-the-top drama for attention. I'm calm and composed and like to be in my own space. Very early on, I left home for my high school and I couldn't be more relieved. Who wants to be around an entitled brat? Life was pretty much fun with my busy schedule in medical school. I used to visit home during holidays or spring break and that too I kept my trips short. Things got straightened out with Carol as we had minimal encounters. Carol dropped out of high school to pursue a career in fashion. Later she again dropped out of fashion school for a modeling career. Until I was in touch with her, she got 2 photoshoot projects for a local apparel brand in 5 years. I'm not sure if we can call this a successful modeling career, which she often refers to. If you think I'm mean, hold on. After I moved out of the house, the bitterness between Carol and me subsided. We met twice a year for a few days. She didn't get enough opportunity to piss me off, so we were cool. In my freshman year in college, I met Smith. He was quite senior to me. He was pursuing his master's while I was in freshman year for a bachelor's degree. Besides, he had a couple of years of hands-on experience as a duty doctor. He was specializing as a heart specialist, one of the most reputed specializations. To add a cherry to the cake, he was handsome. He used to give lessons on the subject of the circulatory system to freshman students to earn some extra bucks and brush up his knowledge. He was popular for his simple teaching methods. More popular amongst the girls, because, you know who doesn't want to take lessons from a blue-eyed, 6'2", lean, and well-built university senior? I also took lessons from him and eventually, we started dating. In my final year of college, he proposed to me. After dating him for 4 years, I had no reason to say no. He was already working at a hospital by then. During holidays, when I went home, Mom saw the ring on my finger and asked. In the happy moments of festivities, I told her everything. She jumped in excitement because it is not usual that I get serious with anyone. Smith was the first guy I ever dated or had sex with. Mom asked me the details about Smith because she sniffed our marriage on the cards. Carol often used to say that I'm never gonna find a good man to marry me. By good, she meant rich and handsome. Whenever she got know that I was seeing a guy, she would remark, "He's so gonna run away. Your relationship won't even last for a week." So when Carol got to know about Smith, her eyes lit up and she wanted to know more about him. It was kinda unusual for her to take an interest in my life because it has always been very boring. I asked, "Why you wanna know about him?" She said, "He's gonna be family. So I should know him." Mom asked me to call him for dinner on New Year's Eve. Later I got to know that Carol had asked Mom to invite Smith. We didn't have any plans for that year, so Smith agreed to tag along. When we reached home, we were greeted by Carol. It was quite surprising because Carol is a party person. She's never seen home on weekends. On New Year's, she is off for a week-long party with her friends, but this time she was at home. Quite surprising. Should have been alarming, right? But I didn't get bothered. I don't give a shit about others' life. I went home with Smith and my sister was floored by Smith. Her first comment was, "I thought you to be rich, but you're handsome too." Her flirtatious gestures were just so evident. It was just right on my face, yet I didn't take any heed. I was secure in my relationship. Throughout the evening, she made moves at him by complimenting him trivially, touching his arms and thighs unnecessarily, and forcing a conversation with him. She sat next to him at the dinner table. I gave her a look and she made a cute pout and said, "You get to sit with him every day. Today I can be his arm candy." Everyone chuckled and we took it as light fun. During the conversation, she got to know that Smith goes for a walk after his dinner. As soon as he cleaned up after the dinner, she offered to give him a tour of the neighborhood. Smith looked at me, while I sat there with a straight face, not knowing what to say. Smith replied with an awkward yes and they both went out for a walk. That night, while we were driving back from my parents' place, Smith asked,
Should I keep this?
Solo due to the interaction between self-medication and quick revive. Before we do this, we want to make sure that we have a few things. 1, weapon, and quick revive. 2, we are currently holding a staff as our mule kick weapon. And 3, we have the self-medication gobblegum in hand. If you want to carry 2 staffs at once, then you will only need to follow the first part of this, and you can do this with any set of staffs that you want. For the fire staff glitch, this becomes a bit more complicated. I'm going to explain this in the most optimal way possible, where we only use 1 full self-medication gobblegum. For the ease of this strategy, we're going to be in the crazy place, since we're going to need access to war weapons that we can buy during the self-medication period. First of all, take the fire staff from its podium, again making sure that this is your mule kick weapon. Next, take it down next to a war weapon if possible. You're going to revive yourself with self-medication ASAP. And from here, you'll have about 10 seconds to do some very specific things. 1, you're going to buy a gun off the wall. 2, you're going to swap one of your non-mule kick guns out for another staff. For the purpose of this, I'm going to choose the ice staff. 3, you're going to hold out the gun that you just bought off the wall, ready for when quick revive revives you. The result of this will be that you have 2 staffs in hand, one of which being the fire staff, which is importantly your mule kick weapon, and the other one just being in your inventory. You'll also have a spare duplicated fire staff in the mount, which we can use.
Okay, cool. Can I do anything now? No, it's just I need to wait. For the ice staff part. But I can't pick up the microphone.
Damn it! I can barely move in this mud.
Kinda wanna grab the perks.
Be careful, the robot's approaching!
We got that, we got that, we got that. Now we should get something, I think. Then we need to cycle this again. Yeah, sure.
Hurry, you sons of bitches.
Hey, it's snowing, we can get ice staff too. We can get ice staff. That's...
killing freak bags. I want to know what happens. Minute jam here. Don't let up.
The box is full. That's good.
It just disappeared.
We can take all these things. We can get a last ice staff. We can build the ice staff.
Asked me if I noticed how Carol was flirting with him. I laughed and brushed it off, saying she's an attention seeker. I thought Smith wasn't so shallow that he would fall for superficial beauty, but dang, he did. He was equally mesmerized by Carol's charm, and he cheated on the first opportunity he got. A few months later, I had my final year exams. As usual, I cut down on our hangouts to focus on my studies. Eventually, I found him cutting down the communication. When I confronted, he said he wanted me to focus on my finals. I was too busy to suspect any foul play. On the last day of my exam, I asked him to pick me up from college. He said he was busy. Later that night, I called him to check upon him. He said he was home but was too tired and ready to doze off. I went to his place to surprise him, but it was locked. I called him again, but he didn't respond. I waited for his call the next day, but he didn't call back. Shamelessly, I called him again and asked him why did he lie the last night. He said he forgot to mention that he crashed at his colleague's place. Stupid me, didn't read this to be any signal. How would I? This was the first time anything such was happening to me. This continued for a week until my lost marbles came back to senses. I asked him on point blank if he wanted to break up with me. He hesitated for a few seconds before murmuring a yes. He said he no longer loved me. That was it. That last conversation we ever had. I didn't ask what, when, how. Heartbreak is always painful, and that too without any reason, even more. He left me with a sense of insecurity, self-doubt, and many unanswered questions which he didn't answer, and neither did I ask. Took months and many bottles of single malt whiskey, but eventually, I moved on. Glad that he broke up after my finals, else I would have taken one more year to finish up medical school. 7 months later, I got a call from Carol and she invites me for her engagement. I congratulated her and asked about the guy. She didn't say the name and asked me to come to the party and meet him in person. I was happy for her. Yes, it saddened me for a while that I was supposed to be married during that time, but I was single and nursing my breakup. I tried to forget my miserable life and showed up at my sister's engagement. As soon as they entered the venue, I saw the board as Carol and Smith. It gave me shivers down my spine, but I calmed down myself, saying Smith is too common a name. He might be someone else. But as I went inside, I ran into two of Smith's friends. They turned other side when they saw me coming. My heartbeat raced as I went near the podium where Carol was supposed to be sitting with her fiancé. The moment I saw Smith sitting with her, his arms wrapped around hers, I froze. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there with tears in my eyes. The next I remember was my mom pulling me to a corner and asking me to behave. She asked me not to create any scene there and let everyone be happy. She said no one knows about our past and she would like to have it that way. I cried out loud and yelled, "You knew everything and yet you let this happen. Carol is a bitch, you all are evil, you all are in this together." By then, I saw Carol coming with an evil smile. It was like 15 years ago, yet I remember every word of her so clearly. That was the most humiliating moment of my life. She said, "You thought you could have this man," pointing towards Smith? "Handsome, tall, rich. And you so plain. No way. You don't deserve him. You deserve someone plain like you. Do you see how beautiful we look together and how people are adoring us? Oh my God. So cute couple. Ha, everyone would have laughed to see you beside him." I wanted to slap right across her face, but my mom stopped me and asked me to leave. She thought I was there to stop the engagement. She was yelling at me, "Why did you come here? Don't you have any self-respect?" I said I didn't know that this bitch is effing him. Had I known, I would have never shown my face. Carol denied to have invited me. She lied to Mom that she didn't invite me. Mom has asked her not to invite me because I would be hurt. But Carol deliberately invited to humiliate me. I left the place bawling and howling. My breakup pain bounced back. It would be an understatement to say that it was difficult. It was the most traumatic phase of my life. The lowest point, I would say. Luckily, I graduated with a good grade and got into a good hospital with hectic duty hours. I barely got time to think about anything. I deliberately kept myself busy on off days. I moved on. Years later, I met my husband at work. He's the board member of the hospital chain I work. We dated for 4 years and got married, and now we are proud parents of 2 kids. Fast forward to a week ago when I got a call from an unknown number. I answered the call and the person identified herself as Carol. Even after hearing her name, it took me few seconds to realize she was my sister. P.S. Few of my patients' names are also Carol. I asked her why she called me. She was acting all so sweet, asking about my life and all. The Carol I know, she won't spare a second on me without any motive. I said, cut the crap and say what you want. She remained silent for a moment and said, actually I need help. My husband, Smith, has gotten into trouble. A patient got post-surgery allergy and the hospital might sack him. I was like, what can I do about it? She said that Smith worked at one of the hospital chains whose board member is my husband. So my husband could save him from any severe punishment. By then I had zoned out. I snapped at her not to call me ever again and we ain't gonna help them. I didn't know that Smith was working for the same hospital chain as me. He was working at a different location. I looked up at the employee portal of the hospital and found Smith, but his current status showed suspended. I wanted to discuss this with my husband, but I didn't want to dig out my past, so I let this slide. 2 days back my mom showed up at my door. Felt like I had seen a ghost. I cut them off since Carol's engagement day. She hugged me and cried saying it was so good to see me after so many years. But I knew that her underlying motive behind all the sweetness was to save Smiths at SS. My husband was home at that time. He heard out Mom's plea for helping her golden son-in-law. My husband said Smith is accused of medical negligence and there's an ongoing investigation against him. He said there's nothing he could do, and even if he could, he won't do it. He doesn't exercise his power for personal benefit. My mom bit her lips and left without saying a word. Yesterday, my husband came back from work and said that Smith's investigation had been concluded. He would be sacked from his job, but my husband has the power of letting him retain his medical license against a hefty penalty amount. He said he could ask the other board members to go lenient on Smith and not forward his case to state healthcare for further investigation. Now I'm at a fix. Should I forget my humiliation and help Smith, or should I make him pay the price of his deeds? I mean, I being a doctor know how difficult it is to get a medical degree, and losing the license is the worst thing that happened to a doctor. Update 1. There was no need to post it here and get the opinion of you guys. What Carol and my mother did after that day had made it clear that they don't deserve any help. They are anything but narcissistic. Carol and Mom have been hurling abuses at me on social media. I don't use Facebook much. This week when I opened it, I found I was tagged on several posts by Carol where she called me vindictive bitch for framing her husband. She has written a long post that I was jealous of her because Smith had dumped me and married her, and I was doing all this to avenge my betrayal. My mom had also jumped on the bandwagon and said that I had abused them and cut them off because I couldn't stand Smith getting married to Carol. Extended family has taken their side and commented that I had taken revenge too far by ripping off Smith's livelihood. Even Smith has commented that I was delusional and that he never loved me and had never proposed to me. He had always loved Carol. Like WTF. I immediately untagged myself and blocked them. I told my husband not to spare Smith from any of the charges. In fact, he should be punished to the maximum for each of his felonies. Mike gave me a smirking look and said he had never seen me this angry. So, Smith was officially sacked from the hospital and his case has been forwarded to the state healthcare department for license cancellation. So, a fresh investigation would be conducted by the government body, and if he is found guilty of the charges that the hospital is claiming, he would lose his license and also get a prison time. That's like a cherry on the cake. We'll update as the situation progresses. Right now, I'm enjoying the drama with a basket of popcorn. Yum yum. Edit, small clarification. Carol and my mom were not added to my social media account. The thing is, I have an open account so anybody could tag me in their post. I had not blocked them earlier because 15 years ago, I wasn't using social media. Now they are blocked from social media and also my life. Update 2, how low can a person stoop? Now I know. So, Smith showed up at my workplace. Like I said, he worked for the same hospital chain as me but different location. He posed himself as a patient and came inside my chamber. He knew that there was no way I would have met him if he had come to see me. I immediately asked him to leave. He said he has paid a fee to consult me, so as a doctor I should treat him. Fair enough, I listened to his problems. Meanwhile, I swiftly switched on the voice recorder on my phone. I did this so that he couldn't trap me in another mess, and glad I did. He was faking his health condition, that he has gotten flu and all. I acted professional and gave him the medication as per his symptoms. But he wasn't ready to leave and unnecessarily asked stupid questions. He started flirting. I asked him to stop and leave. He said, I wanted to apologize to you long back. I didn't intend to hurt you, but your sister trapped me and made me sleep with her. Then she blackmailed me to marry her, else she would press molestation charges on me. I asked him to stop right there because all he spoke was complete BS. I could have called the security on him, but I was damn enjoying his desperateness. Revenge is so sweet, I tell you. I heard him out with a satisfied smile. He went on to say, I know you still love me. That's why you're still hurt and want to take your revenge. Honestly, I still feel for you. I regret marrying Carol. If you can convince your husband to save me from prison time, I promise I'm gonna leave Carol and be your lover. You don't need to leave your husband, but we can secretly have our own thing. That douchebag had the audacity to say this. I burst out in laughter and called security on him and asked him to leave. He had no idea that he was being recorded. The disappointment on his face was so satisfying. He thought he convinced me, lol. I texted Carol and wanted to send her the recordings of her lowlife husband. I said your loser husband visited my clinic posing as a patient. She said, I know, he tells me everything. We also know that you still love him. I can let you sleep with him for a night if you can save his license and prison time. Her response blew my mind. No point talking to her any further. They are together in this dirty game. I told my husband about this and he was aghast. He said we could have sued them for offering bribes, but it would dig out my painful past. I said let him handle one charge at a time, but I'm gonna do my bit to extract my revenge. I added Carol, Smith, my mom, and other relatives on Facebook.
It's absolutely
Carol
crazy.
and Smith
Also has to
accepted
know
it
at
at
this
once.
point,
Maybe they took it to be a positive sign for me. Then I wrote a long post about how Carol, Smith, and my mom had been trying to manipulate me to help Smith skip prison time. I attached the
I've never
screenshot of
seen
the
anyone-
conversation with Carol. I also turned the voice recordings into a still video with Smith and Carol's picture with the voice running in the background and uploaded. That post just blew up with comments. I blocked Carol,
Heads up,
Smith
the
and Mom
robot's
because I
coming
knew
this
they
way.
would retaliate. My extended family and relatives expressed their disgust about Carol offering to let Smith hook up with me to get away with his negligence. Carol and my mom tried to contact me, but I had blocked their calls and voicemails. I spent the whole of yesterday and today reading the comments on the post. People have gone next level trolling Carol and Smith.
Oh, this doesn't
My
work.
weekend couldn't be better. Now on to the next story.
And you, like,
Story
grab
2.
a weapon.
Discovered my wife's year-long affair when our kid's bus driver accidentally revealed their secret. The desperate voicemail she left him after I kicked her out. At the time of this story, my wife and I were together for 10 years and had 2 sons under the age of 6. My wife was very close to her aging mother and made sure to include her in our family life, even though she lived in a retirement home. Once a week, we'd all go visit her and bring a collection of our sons' toys for them to show her. Soon thereafter, my wife encouraged the boys to make gifts for their teachers and bus driver with grandma's help. At the same time, she started taking her mom out to sightsee and spend some one-on-one time together. The routine was, she'd get the kids off the bus and then start getting ready to go out. Over time she started seeing her mom twice a week by herself and every other Sunday with all of us. This was a lot, but even still, her mom would always say how much she missed us. I wondered how that could be if she was taking her out all the time, but I just dismissed the thought. One day, my wife had gotten the kids off the bus and came back inside, cheerful as ever. She skipped upstairs to get ready for another outing with her mom.
I've never
My boy
seen
asked to
anyone
watch
use
a
that
show,
angle.
so I
Okay,
grabbed
and
my
then this
wife's
is
phone
one
off
of
the
coolest
charger
tricks
and
in the
noticed
entire
several
thing,
missed
'cause it's,
calls
like,
from my
easy to
son's bus
understand,
driver.
but kind of hard to pull off. You shoot this thing from the entire cross of the map, but kind of hard to pull off. You shoot this thing from the entire cross.
Okay, that's gonna be a little bit harder, I think. Where? Left or right of the tree?
Understand, but kind of hard to pull off. You shoot this thing from the
Left
entire.
of the tree. I crawlers with y'all. Nice. Nice, 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 nice. Oh, there it is. It's that thing, no?
I don't think that was right.
Yeah, I'm not hitting that.
It's like easy to understand, but kind of hard to pull off. You shoot this thing from the entire.
What happened?
Nice, I did it.
I don't know how, but you are so much closer than my father ever got.
They were both home safe and sound, so I couldn't. People have gone next level trolling Carol and Smith. My weekend couldn't be better. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Discovered my wife's year-long affair when our kid's bus driver accidentally revealed their secret. The desperate voicemail she left him after I kicked her out. At the time of this story, my wife and I were together for 10 years and had 2 sons under the age of 6. My wife was very close to her aging mother and made sure to include her in our family life, even though she lived in a retirement home. Once a week, we'd all go visit her and bring a collection of our sons' toys for them to show her. Soon thereafter, my wife encouraged the boys to make gifts for their teachers and bus driver with grandma's help. At the same time, she started taking her mom out to sightsee and spend some one-on-one time together. The routine was, she'd get the kids off the bus and then start getting ready to go out. Over time she started seeing her mom twice a week by herself and every other Sunday with all of us. This was a lot, but even still, her mom would always say how much she missed us. I wondered how that could be if she was taking her out all the time, but I just dismissed the thought. One day, my wife had gotten the kids off the bus and came back inside, cheerful as ever. She skipped upstairs to get ready for another outing with her mom. My boy asked to watch a show, so I grabbed my wife's phone off the charger and noticed several missed calls from my son's bus driver. They were both home safe and sound, so I couldn't imagine why there would be so many missed calls from him. I tried to call him back, but found that my wife changed the lock on her phone. Instinct took over as I downloaded an app on my phone to disguise my number as my wife's. I set the call to record before I dialed his number. As soon as he answered, he said, "Hi love, are you ready for the special date I promised you?" I hung up as soon as I heard this. I went upstairs to find my wife as she got ready, and she looked ravishing. You could tell she was going on a special date. As soon as she saw me, she started downplaying how nice she looked and explained that her mom wanted her to take pride in her appearance, no matter what the occasion. I played the recording of the bus driver's voice, and her perfume bottle fell from her hand, smashing to pieces on the floor. She immediately became desperate, begging me to just hold on a minute and listen to her, but I still grabbed the car keys. On my way out with the boys, I insisted that she still have App come get her and never bring her back. She was too panicked to cry, just hyperventilating and saying she would have nowhere to stay because her home was with me and the boys. I refused to give in to her. I called the bus driver again, this time on speakerphone. He answered in a weary tone. I told him I knew what was going on and he needed to come pick up my wife because she belonged to him now. He quickly told me to slow down, that he was married, and he didn't want to get involved in any drama. My wife's face fell when she realized just how bad her situation was. I just shrugged and hung up while my wife started redialing his number in vain. Just before I left I heard her leave a voicemail, telling him he needed to come pick her up and get her a place to stay because this was all his fault. I suppose she continued calling him late into the night, until she found his wife on social media and publicly begged her to tell him to call her, because she needed to speak with him urgently. This obviously raised suspicions that led to her discovering the truth. My wife had been dating and sleeping with her husband, our children's bus driver, for an entire year. I had no idea it had been going on at all, let alone for so long. I felt like an idiot for failing to look into my wife's whereabouts sooner, but I truly believed she was spending time with her mom. She was, but only very rarely. App's wife slandered my wife's name through the school and all over town. App was so ashamed and willing to do whatever it took to get
Ja? Kom zo. Ik heb al iedere keer dat ik meeting opdoe. Iedere keer dat ik meeting opdoe. Ja. Flux doen.
uiteindelijk bijvoorbeeld, we gaan met publiceren bijvoorbeeld. Bijvoorbeeld gewoon. In het bergen met bijvoorbeeld, dat is wat ik aan het doen. Zeg maar, nou, dat is goed.
Oh, zag het.
Dat is ja, nou, 6.
Gisteren was weer heel erg.
Ja, 6 in een day. Is dat heel erg? 6 in een day. Water, water. Water helpt heel goed. Jullie hebben het. Dit is wel goed. iemand zeggen tegen jezelf, ik ben sterker. Ja, net sterk. Sterk, maar ik ga iets anders doen. Ze hebben mensen, ik heb me voorhouden, die zich een maanden. We kennen je andere meisjes. We kennen je, Terraria Safé. Dus hier. بس هي علاش علاش نتبعت شكون اللي عندك هي ولا انت علاش هي كانت هنايا مع عرفت شنو عملت لا عرفتينا ماشي هي
Dat is slecht voor mij. Ja, simpel gezegd, dat is heel slecht. Dit voor mij, voor mij. Gewoon mensen met een goed, gezond en fijn leven.
Dat is niet gezond voor jou. Je ziet dat. En je zegt dat. Dus zeg het je. En dan heb je goed gedaan. Dat is niet gezond. Dat is niet goed. Dus sporten. Anders sporten. Afleiden ze. Goed studeren. Denk niet naar dit fles
Nog dat is goed.
je op school kent mijn muziekje kennen, toch? Zij hebben contact met mijn sterke dat wordt je school leren en met goed school leren zo gaat het om wacht het نساها om wacht het نساها ما تبغي تهدر اجي جات عندي هدر معايا تصير مية نقولك نودك نعم بسيكولوج ماشي يعمل بعيدة ماشي تعمل سبورت
Dat is zo. En dan gaan we afmaken van het uurrollen.
Gain his wife's forgiveness. He ghosted my wife and even stopped getting on social media. He tried in vain to prove loyalty to his wife in the hopes things could go back to normal. They never did. For any of us. My wife was mortally embarrassed that her lover had given her up at the first sign of trouble, and that in her attempts to get his help, she broke his family apart and made things worse for herself. I also ghosted her, until a visitation schedule was made and I was awarded primary custody. Her desperate affair cost her reputation, self-confidence, and family. She isn't the same as she was, and I doubt.
Yeah, how do I do this again?
Cross of the map.
This one. This.
Interaction between self-medication and quick revive. Before we do this, we want to make sure that we have a as our mule. 1. We have quick revive. 2. We are currently holding a staff as our mule kick weapon. And 3. We have the self-medication gobblegum in hand. If you want to carry 2 staffs at once, then you will only need to follow the first part of this, and you can do this with any set of staffs that you want. For the fire staff glitch, this becomes a bit more complicated. I'm going to explain this in the most optimal way possible, where we only use 1 full self-medication gobblegum. For the ease of this strategy, we're going to be in the crazy place, since we're going to need access to war weapons that we can buy during the self-medication period. First of all, take the fire staff from its podium, again making sure that this is your mule kick weapon. Next, take it down next to a war weapon if possible. You're going to revive yourself with self-medication ASAP. And from here, you'll have about 10 seconds to do some very specific things. 1. You're going to buy a gun off the wall. 2. You're going to swap one of your non-mule kick guns out for another staff. For the purpose of this, I'm going to choose the ice staff. 3. You're going to hold out the gun that you just bought off the wall, ready for when quick revive revives you. The result of this will be the gun that you just bought. For the purpose of this, I'm going to choose the ice staff. 3. You're going to hold out the gun that you just bought off the wall, ready for when quick revive revives you. The result of this will be
There you got 2.
that you have 2 staffs in hand, one of which being the fire staff, which is importantly your mule kick weapon, and the other one just being in your inventory. You'll also have a spare duplicated fire staff in the mound, which we can use later. Just because you don't physically see it there, doesn't mean that it isn't there. You'll be able to pick it up later when we need it. After this, head to the mound, and we should have 2 charges of self-medication left. It's important that we still have 2 staffs in hand, as this will only work if we have 2 staffs. Next, take another down, and this time you're going to do some more specific things after you...
But let's test it out.
The elemental fire is yours to command. Finish what has begun. Free me from Agartha.
This is not looking good. Not in the mood for this shit.
Almost. Okay, so I'm gonna grab the fire staff. That's my third weapon. And then go to a wall boy.
There's too many of them. Where the fuck are you guys?
Okay, so I'm
Chill.
what did you say? Yo, what's good, Dylan? What's good? How you doing?
Take it down next to a wall weapon if possible. You're going to revive yourself with self-medication ASAP. And from here, you'll have about 10 seconds to do some very specific
How you doing,
things.
Dylan?
1, you're going to buy a gun off the wall. 2, you're going to swap one of your non-mule kit guns.
Okay. Gun off the wall. It's not working?
Bitches got lucky. Nice to know you got my back.
Huh? Wait, how does this work? I fucked it up. So is a KM a third weapon? But on the fire staff is at spawn again. But so I fucked it up.
Insta-kill.
Let's grab the
Red
fire staff
haze
again.
coming on. It's like I wanna pick a fight.
Oh, Jesus. Bitch. So the KN is that weapon. So fire stuff is acquired. At the third place now. So now I'm gonna need to take it down. Got a kill. I need to take it down. Got a kill. The ray gun. And
Damn
revive
mud's slowing me
my ass
down.
fast as fuck. I need to take it down. Get one kill. Grab. Now it is in my third weapon slot. So, what was the tutorial?
From here, you'll have about 10 seconds to do some very specific things. 1, you're going to buy a gun off the wall. Seconds to do some very specific things. 1, you're going to buy a gun off the wall. 2, you're going to swap one of your non-mule kit guns out for another staff. For the purpose of this, I'm going
I'm mad. Did Richtofen make these? Or is this something to do with the girl?
Wait, huh? It didn't work again, wait. I did get the fire staff back. So the Zor back. The ST. Okay, so I need to take it down. Buy that Weevil weapon. You take it down, buy the Weevil weapon, sprint and grab a staff. Take it down, buy this with the STG. Then swap the STG back.
Couldn't make it without me, huh?
Why couldn't I? What the fuck? The fire staff is in my second slot? I don't know how to do it, RIP. Can't I remove this? So the fire staff apparently is a must.
Don't make no sense, but I'll take it.
Okay. How do I check which weapon? Okay, so the Zor is first. No, this one is second. Right? I kinda wanna take it down. Just to see. I can do that. I can do that.
Be careful, the robot's approaching!
Like, how do I check what the mule kick third weapon called zombies? How you check what third weapon is?
And then press. Okay, so press triangle. Okay, I'm gonna plug in my controller now. It will always show the first weapon. So the Vesper is my first. Second. Third. This is my first, okay. Nah, right, it can't be, right? Don't tell me my or something is a fucking... I'm actually gonna take it down right now just to see. I'm actually gonna take it down. Come on, attack me faster.
Bitches got lucky.
Gone. And my Zora is gone. Okay, damn. That I just had to be. So now I can pick up the fire staff as my third weapon. Okay. So fire staff is a third slot. Kinda hope to get like a what's it called? Raindrops. Self-med would also be cool. And I need to grab quick fire again. So the fountain. That's sure. Do I need stamina up right now? Not really. Why the fuck? No, I don't need stamina. Nah. I do need quick revive though.
Ever be. I'm thankful I'm not the one that has to figure out how to live with myself without my kids because of some stupid mistake that shouldn't have happened. App even apologized to me, explaining that when he started seeing my wife, he was in a bad place in his own marriage. He justified seeing my wife by deciding that he only needed to rely on someone emotionally. Emotional support turned into physical, and then before he knew it they were living a double life and got caught red-handed.
Widow's Wine is pretty good. I like that.
Husband and I paid for my Sills kids' college for years. But the boys turned spoiled and entitled, while calling me a SLT, and got caught selling something they shouldn't have. This is going to be a long one, but I promise it's worth the read. I've been stewing over this for weeks, and I need some outside perspective. There's a lot to unpack here. I'm a 38-year-old woman, and I've been married to my husband, Neil, 40M, for over 15 years now. For the most part, our marriage has been smooth sailing, a peaceful journey through life's ups and downs. We've built a good life together, with successful careers and a comfortable home. But there's always been something missing. The only real storm we've had to weather in our marriage was our struggle with infertility. Due to a medical condition I'd rather not get into, let's just say my reproductive system decided to go on permanent strike. We couldn't conceive. It was utterly devastating. Neil and I had always dreamed of having a big family, filling our home with the laughter and chaos of children. We'd spend hours talking about how we'd decorate the nursery, debating baby names, and imagining family vacations with our future kids. When we first got the news, it felt like the floor had dropped out from under us. We went through all the stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally, a reluctant acceptance. But we weren't ready to give up without a fight. We tried everything, and I mean everything. Fertility treatments that turned me into a hormonal mess. Neil deserves a medal for putting up with me during that time. Alternative therapies that had me drinking weird teas and standing on my head, don't ask. We even looked into experimental treatments, but the risks outweighed the potential benefits. Month after month, we'd get our hopes up, only to have them dashed. Each negative pregnancy test felt like a personal
This
failure.
won't keep 'em out for
I know
long.
it's not rational, but I couldn't help feeling like less of a woman, like my body was betraying me. After years of heartbreak and thousands of dollars down the drain, we had to face facts. We weren't going to have biological children. It was time to consider other options. Adoption seemed like the natural next step. We still had so much love to give, and there are so many children out there who need homes. We threw ourselves into researching the process, attending information sessions, and talking to other adoptive parents. But let me tell you, the adoption process in our state is, well, let's just say it's a bureaucratic nightmare that would make Kafka weep. We looked into it, but between the mountain of paperwork, the endless waiting lists, and the uncertainty, we just didn't see it working out. Plus, both Neil and I have pretty demanding careers. I'm a corporate lawyer, and Neil's a software engineer at a startup. We're talking long hours, high stress, and not a lot of flexibility. We didn't want to adopt a child only to be absent parents, shuttling them between daycare and after-school programs while we worked 60-hour weeks. The more we thought about it, the more we realized that maybe, just
They don't see
maybe,
us so
the
well.
universe was trying to tell us something. Maybe we weren't meant to be parents in the traditional sense. It was a tough pill to swallow, but we made the difficult decision to remain childless. Instead, we decided to channel our parental instincts into helping needy children in our community. We figured if we couldn't have kids of our own, we could at least make a difference in the lives of other children who needed support. Now, here's where things get complicated. Neil's sister, let's call her Fiona, got divorced when her kids were young. Her ex-husband was a real piece of work, abusive, alcoholic, the whole 9 yards. Think of every bad Lifetime movie husband rolled into one, and you've got Fiona's ex. The divorce was messy, to put it mildly. Fiona was left struggling to make ends meet, trying to rebuild her life while taking care of 3 young kids. The child support she receives is barely enough to keep the lights on, let alone cover all the expenses that come with raising 3 growing children. Fiona works 2 jobs, she's a teacher by day and waitresses at night, but it's still a struggle. That's why Neil and I decided to step in and help fund her kids' education. We figured it was a way to make a real difference in their lives, to give them opportunities they might not otherwise have. Plus, it felt good to be able to help family. Little did we know what we were getting ourselves into. Fiona's kids are 1. Monica, 23F, the oldest and, honestly, the only one who hasn't made me question our decision to help. 2. Joel, 20M, the middle child and the start of our problems. 3. Justin, 17M, the youngest and, as you'll see, the one who really pushed me over the edge. Let me tell you about Monica first, because she's the bright spot in this whole mess. This girl is an absolute rock star. From the moment we started helping with her education, she took full advantage of every opportunity that came her way. Monica was always a good student, but with the pressure of financial worries off her shoulders, she really flourished. She graduated high school as valedictorian, snagged a full ride to a top university, and absolutely crushed it in college. We're talking Dean's List every semester, internships at prestigious companies, the whole 9 yards. Now, at 23, she's landed a job at a top multinational company and is absolutely killing it in her career. Every time I think about her, I can't help but feel a sense of pride. She's smart, hardworking, and most importantly, grateful for the opportunities she's been given. Monica never forgot the help we provided. She still calls us regularly, not to ask for money, but to update us on her life and thank us for our support. She even insisted on taking us out to dinner to celebrate her first big promotion, saying she wanted to start paying us back for everything we've done. Watching her thrive makes all the drama with her brothers almost worth it. Almost. Now, on to the boys. Oh boy, where do I even begin? Joel and Justin were bright kids once upon a time. I remember when they were little, always asking questions, eager to learn. Joel had a knack for math and loved building elaborate structures with his Legos. Justin was the family artist, always doodling in notebooks and coming up with wild stories. But somewhere along the way, they lost that spark. It's like they hit their teenage years and decided that being entitled jerks was their life's calling. I don't know if it was the divorce, peer pressure, or just plain laziness, but the bright, curious boys we once knew disappeared, replaced by two surly, ungrateful teenagers. Joel was the first to start showing signs of trouble. It started small, missing assignments, talking back to teachers, that sort of thing. We chalked it up to typical teenage rebellion at first. But as time went on, it became clear that this was more than just a phase.
Looks like some
His
kind of
grades
beacon.
started slipping, and he began hanging out with a crowd that, quite frankly, gave me the creeps. These were kids who seemed to think that rules didn't apply to them, that the world owed them something just for existing.
Mistake.
We tried to intervene. Neil and I sat down with Joel countless times, trying to understand what was going on and how we could help. But every conversation ended the same way, with Joel rolling his eyes and assuring us that he had everything under control. Fiona was no help. She was so overwhelmed with work and trying to keep the family afloat that she tended to let things slide with the boys. They're just going through a phase, she'd say. They'll grow out of it. Spoiler alert, they didn't. The trouble really started when Joel graduated high school. Neil and I sat down with him to discuss his college plans, expecting to hear about which universities he was considering or what majors he was interested in. Instead, this kid had the audacity to tell us he didn't want to go to college at all. No, he wanted us to give him the money we'd set aside for his tuition in cash. Now, I'm all for entrepreneurship. If the kid had a solid business plan, I might have been open to the idea. But when we asked him what kind of business he wanted to start, his answer was vague, to say the least. Something about an online business. No concrete plan, no market research, nothing. Just a half-baked idea and the expectation that we'd hand over a small fortune to fund it. The conversation went something like this. Me, so, Joel, what exactly is this business you want to start? Joel, it's an online thing. You wouldn't understand. Neil, try us. We're pretty tech savvy. Joel, it's like a platform for influencers and stuff. Me, okay, and what would this platform do? Joel, you know, connect people. Make money. It's complicated. Neil, have you done any market research? Who are your competitors? Joel, rolling his eyes, God, you sound like my economics teacher. It's not that kind of business. It's more organic. Me, organic or not, we need more details before we can consider investing in this. Joel, investing? It's my money. You promised to pay for my education. This is my education. And round we went. It was like talking to a brick wall, if brick walls could roll their eyes and sigh dramatically. Neil and I were skeptical, to put it mildly. We told Joel we needed some time to think it over. You'd think we'd told him we were canceling Christmas. He started hounding us about the money, acting like we owed it to him. The entitlement was off the charts. After weeks of back and forth, we finally put our foot down. We told Joel that while we supported his ambition, we weren't comfortable investing in a business venture with no clear direction. You'd think we'd just told him we were going to sacrifice his firstborn child. The tantrum this 20-year-old man threw was something to behold. He didn't confront us directly, oh no, that would require actual courage. Instead, he went crying to his mother and grandmother, spinning some story about how we were crushing his dreams and going back on our word. His argument?
Okay, so I need to get down, instantly kill them, buy a weapon, hold the STG, and pick up the staff, and then go back to the weevil. Okay. Buy a weapon while holding STG. There it is. Just buy the weapon while holding this. Switch to the SCG, grab it, and switch back.
I know you got my back. Now I'm mad.
Do we have it? We have it. I don't have the ICR anymore, sadly. We have it. Oh, we did it. We did it, we did it, we did it. It's so cool. Okay. So now we go down there. With the fire still in the third slot. So this is 1. This is 2. This is 3. We have 2 staffs. Okay, so what now?
Choose the quick revive. 3, you're going to guns out for another staff. For the purpose of this, I'm going to choose the ice staff. 3, the result will be your mule kick weapon, and the other one just being in your inventory. You'll also have a spare duplicated fire staff. It is 2 charges of self-medication left. It's important that we still have 2 staffs in hand, as this will only work if we have 2 staffs. Next, take another down, and this time you're going to do some more specific things after you revive yourself with self-medication. 1, insert the fire staff you get back as soon as you get revived from self-med. 2, hold out your ice staff and swap it for the duplicated fire staff that's in the podium, and insert that fire staff. 3, immediately take the ice staff back from its podium. When quick revive revives you, we should have 2 staffs again, including another fire staff. Take 1 final down and once again follow these steps. 1, insert the fire staff you get back as soon as you revive from self-med. And 2, insert the final fire staff that you get back.
Okay, so
Back as soon as you get
place fire
revived from
staff.
self-med. 2, hold out your ice staff and swap it for the duplicated fire staff that's in the podium. And insert that fire.
So place
things after you revive yourself with self-medication. 1, insert the fire staff you get back as soon as you get revived from self-med. 2, hold out your ice staff and swap it for the duplicated fire staff.
So I'ma just hold this, go there. Okay, I'll just try it. Where the zombie at? I'ma try it. So press F.
Without me, huh?
And now switch to lightning. Press F. And pick up again.
Guess I owe you one.
It didn't work. Why didn't it work? Why didn't it work?
I've trained for this.
Self-med. 2, hold out your ice staff and swap it for the duplicated fire staff that's in the podium. And insert that fire staff. 3, immediately take the ice staff back from its podium. When quick revive revives you, we should have 2 staffs again, including another fire staff. Take 1 final.
Okay, so sadly it did not work.
Looks like we all just got loaded up. Freak bitch. Picked on the wrong Marine.
Too bad, too bad. So we did switch that.
This was gonna go any other way.
So now
The sooner you all die, the sooner I could get out of here.
I don't have a third. Right. I'm gonna go grab. Grab this real quick.
I'll take one of these, thanks.
And then grab. And then you're gonna do it again. Wait, huh? Oops.
Be careful, the robot's approaching! This'll do me just fine. You don't get to walk away.
Let me try something. I have an idea. So we got these, and I have 2 staffs here left. So we're gonna grab. The third one was this. This was the third one. Can I grab it? Yes. So that's the third one. So I'm gonna take a down by okay, I'm gonna take it down by the KN. Switch to lightning. Switch to KN.
You know you got my back.
Switch to this. Wait, huh?
Now I'm mad.
It didn't work. How did this become our main weapon now? Okay, I don't know. Okay, that didn't work. So I'm gonna put stabs on the robots. That's ice.
Damn it. I can barely move in this mud.
Right?
That the money we'd set aside for his education was his money, and he should be able to do whatever he wanted with it. I'm sorry, but since when does a gift come with the stipulation that the giver has no say in how it's used? Last time I checked, that's not how generosity works. Fiona and my mother-in-law tried to guilt us into changing our minds. They accused us of faltering in our commitment to support Fiona's children. Because apparently, in their world, supporting someone's education means blindly handing over cash for any harebrained scheme they come up with. My mother-in-law, bless her heart, has always had a bit of a blind spot when it comes